The most feared man in the Russo family did not fall in a gunfight. He did not fall in a courtroom, or in the back seat of a burning car, or under the flashing lights of a police raid. Gabriel Russo fell in silence, behind the locked gates of his own mansion, after one poisoned bullet tore through his body and left him trapped inside a chair he hated more than death itself. The city still whispered his name with fear, but inside the marble halls of his estate, fear had changed shape. It was no longer the fear of what Gabriel Russo might do to his enemies. It was the quiet, creeping fear that the empire he built with blood and patience might already be slipping out of his hands. The Russo mansion sat above the Hudson, like a stone fortress watching over the dark water. Tall iron gates guarded the long private road. Security cameras blinked beneath black glass domes. Men in tailored coats stood near the front steps, with their hands folded in front of them, pretending to be polite while their eyes measured every visitor like a possible threat. Everything about the place looked rich, cold, and untouchable. The floors shined like still water. The walls were covered with old paintings of men who had never smiled in their lives. Every room smelled faintly of expensive wood, winter air, and secrets no one was brave enough to say out loud. Elena Moore noticed all of it the moment she stepped out of the black town car. She stood at the bottom of the wide stone stairs, with a worn leather medical bag in one hand, and her heart beating hard beneath her coat. She had worked in hospitals, rehab centers, private homes, and long-term recovery clinics. She had helped athletes learn to walk after shattered bones. She had helped old men lift their arms again after strokes. She had helped frightened teenagers stand after accidents that should have broken their spirits forever. But she had never been hired by a man like Gabriel Russo. She was not supposed to know who he really was. The agency paperwork called him a private executive recovering from nerve trauma and lower body weakness after a violent home invasion. But Elena had lived in New York long enough to understand the careful spaces between official words. Nobody sent 3 armed drivers for a normal patient. Nobody searched a physical therapist's medical bag twice unless the house had enemies. Nobody paid triple her usual rate in cash and asked her to sign a silence agreement before she even met the patient. Still, Elena walked up the steps. She was 30 years old, soft around the middle, wide in the hips, strong in the legs, and used to people underestimating what her body could do. Strangers saw her size before they saw her degree, her experience, or the quiet strength in her hands. Some patients had looked disappointed when she entered the room, as if healing had to arrive thin to be trusted. Some doctors spoke around her, not to her. Some families assumed she would be gentle because she was big, or weak because she was soft. Elena had stopped correcting every ignorant person years ago. She had learned a better answer. She worked, she lifted, she supported. She stayed steady when everyone else panicked. By the time her patients took their first steps, they knew exactly who had held them up. The heavy front doors opened before she knocked. A tall man with silver hair and a face like carved stone looked her over once. From her dark curls pulled back at the nape of her neck to her sensible shoes planted firmly on the cold stone. "Miss Moore," he said. Elena, his expression did not change. "Mr. Russo is waiting." The word waiting seemed too gentle for what she heard inside the mansion. Something shattered somewhere deep in the house, followed by a low, furious curse that made 2 guards near the hall lower their eyes. The silver-haired man sighed almost without sound. "I am Carlo. I manage the house." "You mean you manage the damage?" Elena said softly. For the first time, Carlo looked at her with something close to interest. "You may be the first one to understand that before entering the room." He led her down a long corridor where the ceiling rose high above them, and every footstep echoed. They passed a dining room set for 12, though no one seemed to be eating, a library lined with locked glass cases, and a sunroom where the winter light spread pale and silver across the floor. At the end of the hall, 2 guards stood on either side of a pair of dark wooden doors. Carlo opened them without knocking. Gabriel Russo sat near the tall windows in a black wheelchair, turned halfway toward the river. He was broader than Elena expected, even thinner from recovery than he must have been before. His shoulders still filled out the black shirt he wore, and the muscles in his forearms stood sharp beneath his skin as his hands gripped the chair's wheels. His face was beautiful in a severe way, all hard lines, dark eyes, and a mouth that looked as if it had forgotten softness. There was a scar near his right temple, still faintly red. Another disappeared beneath the collar of his shirt. His left leg was braced stiffly, his right foot angled slightly inward. Pain lived around him like weather. It darkened the air before he even spoke. On the floor near him lay the shattered remains of a glass vase. Carlo cleared his throat. "Mr. Russo, this is Elena Moore, the physical therapist recommended by Dr. Harlan." Gabriel did not turn fully. "I told Harlan I was done with therapists." "Yes," Carlo said several times. "Then why is she standing in my house?" Elena set her medical bag down gently. "Because your doctor thinks you can recover more function than you currently have." Now Gabriel turned. His eyes landed on her, cold and sharp enough to make most people step back. Elena did not. He looked at her for a long moment, and she felt the old familiar weight of judgment pass over her. Not fear, not curiosity, judgment. It started at her face, dropped to her shoulders, passed over the curve of her stomach beneath her sweater, and settled briefly on her hips before returning to her eyes. A slow, bitter smile touched his mouth. "This is the expert?" The guards by the door went still. Elena folded her hands in front of her. "I am." Gabriel gave a dry laugh with no humor inside it. "I need someone to help me stand, not someone who looks like they'll need a chair beside me after 5 minutes." Carlo's face tightened. One of the guards looked down. The air seemed to freeze around the insult, waiting to see what Elena would do with it. She had heard worse. She had heard it from men weaker than Gabriel Russo. She had heard it from women crueler than any man in the room. She had heard it in waiting rooms, elevators, gyms, restaurants, and from relatives who thought concern was a polite mask for cruelty. The words still touched something tender inside her, but they did not knock her down. Elena stepped closer. "You are angry because your body stopped obeying you." Gabriel's eyes narrowed. "You are ashamed because men who used to fear you now open doors for you, like you are made of glass. You are tired because pain has become the first thing you feel in the morning and the last thing you feel at night. And because of all that, you are trying to make me leave before I can ask you to do something difficult." The room became so quiet that Elena could hear the soft hum of the window glass against the wind. Gabriel's voice dropped. "You know nothing about me. I know patients like you. I am not a patient. You are today." His hands tightened on the wheels of his chair. For a second, Elena thought he might order her dragged out. Instead, he stared at her with a dangerous kind of stillness, as if he had not been spoken to honestly in months and did not remember whether he hated it or needed it. Elena removed her coat and laid it over the back of a nearby chair. Beneath it, she wore dark trousers and a simple blue sweater. Nothing fancy, nothing meant to impress. She rolled her sleeves to her elbows, revealing strong forearms and hands that had held the weight of people heavier, weaker, more frightened, and more stubborn than the man glaring at her. "My size is not the problem in this room," she said. "My body is the reason I can support yours without shaking. It is the reason I can brace you when your balance fails. It is the reason you will not take me down with you if your legs give out. You can insult me all morning if you want, Mr. Russo, but when you are ready to stop punishing yourself, I will be the person strong enough to help you stand." Gabriel's jaw worked once. He looked at Carlo. "Leave." Carlo hesitated. "Everyone leaves," Gabriel said. The guard stepped out first. Carlo followed, giving Elena one brief glance before shutting the doors behind him. Now the room belonged only to the broken king and the woman he had tried to wound because he did not know what else to do with his pain. Gabriel turned his chair toward her. "You think you can fix me?" "No," Elena said. "I think you have to fix yourself. I can only make sure you do not lie to yourself while doing it." His bitter smile returned, smaller this time. "You speak like you are not afraid of me." "I am afraid of many things," she said. "A patient with bad manners is not one of them." For the first time, something changed in his eyes. It was not warmth, not yet. It was attention. The first session was ugly. Gabriel refused to answer most of her questions. He snapped when she checked the tension in his left calf. He swore when she asked him to shift his weight forward. When she had him grip the parallel bars installed beside the windows, sweat gathered near his hairline almost immediately. His body trembled from the effort of movements most people never thought about. Standing was no longer a command he could give and expect to be obeyed. It was a negotiation with pain, weakness, and fear. Elena did not soften her voice into pity. She did not praise him for every breath like a child. She watched his posture, corrected his shoulders, adjusted the brace around his knee, and counted each second he managed to hold himself upright. At 9 seconds, his arms shook violently. At 11, his right leg buckled. Elena moved before he fell, stepping behind him, one arm around his torso, her stance wide and firm. His back hit her chest. His weight dropped against her, heavy and sudden, but she absorbed it with a quiet grunt and lowered him safely into the chair. Gabriel's breathing was rough. His face had gone pale. For a moment neither of them spoke, then he said low and furious, Don't look proud of me." Elena walked around to face him. "I'm not proud of you." His eyes flashed. "You lasted 11 seconds, she said. "Tomorrow we aim for 12. A strange silence followed. Gabriel looked away first. Their work continued that way day after day. Elena arrived every morning at 8, passed through the gates, signed in with security, and entered the cold, watchful mansion with her bag and her calm voice. Gabriel insulted the routine, resisted the exercises, and complained that she was wasting his time. Then he did the work anyway. At first he did it with anger, then with resentment, then with a kind of hard, silent determination that Elena recognized better than any emotion. It was the first sign that some part of him still wanted to live beyond the chair. She learned the shape of his pain, the sharp nerve burned down his left thigh, the heavy numbness near his foot, the weakness in his hip that made him twist when he tried to stand. She learned that he hated help with transfers because it made him feel exposed. She learned that he preferred the windows open during therapy, even in winter, because cold air kept him focused. She learned that he always looked toward the door before attempting anything difficult, as if making sure no one but Elena would see him fail. And Gabriel learned her steadiness. He learned that Elena did not flinch when he raised his voice. He learned that she remembered every number from the day before. He learned that she could tell when he was hiding pain from the way his left hand closed into a fist. He learned that when she touched him, it was never with fear, disgust, or nervous little movements. Her hands were warm, sure, and professional. They did not treat his body like a ruined thing. They treated it like a body still worth fighting for. That was what unsettled him most. On the 8th day, after he managed to stand for 22 seconds, he lowered into the chair with his teeth clenched and his shirt damp at the collar. Elena handed him a towel. He took it without snapping. "That was better," she said. "It was 22 seconds. It was twice what you had on the first day. A child can stand longer than that. A child didn't take a bullet near the spine and survive poisoning from whatever was on it." His eyes cut to her. Elena paused. The medical records had been careful with their wording, but not careful enough. There had been a toxin involved, something meant to inflame the nerves, slow healing, and make paralysis more likely. The official report called it contamination. Elena did not believe in contamination that arrived so neatly with an assassin's bullet. Gabriel's voice was quiet. "Dr. Harlan told you? Your chart told me enough. That chart is private. I am part of your care team. You are part of nothing in this house." Elena took the towel from his hand and folded it once. "That is not true anymore." He stared at her, and for a few seconds she saw the man beneath the anger, not soft. Gabriel Russo would never be soft, but tired, trapped, lonely in a way power could not fix. Before he could answer, the doors opened. Valentina De Luca entered like a woman designed to belong in a mansion like that. She was tall, elegant, and wrapped in cream-colored silk that moved around her like water. Her dark hair was twisted into a perfect knot. A diamond bracelet flashed at her wrist. Her beauty was smooth and expensive, the kind that made people lower their voices without knowing why. She carried a silver tray with a tall glass on it. "My poor Gabriel," she said, her voice sweet enough to hide something sharp beneath it. "Carlo told me you were torturing yourself again." Gabriel's face closed immediately. "Therapy is not torture." Valentina looked at Elena as if noticing a stain on the carpet. "Of course, I only worry. You always push too hard when strangers want to prove something." Elena kept her expression calm. "We are following a controlled recovery plan." "How comforting," Valentina said. Her eyes drifted over Elena's body with delicate cruelty. "And you are physically able to manage him?" "Gabriel is not a small man." Gabriel's hand tightened on the armrest. Elena answered before he could. "Yes," Valentina smiled. "How lucky for us." She crossed the room and held the glass toward Gabriel. "Drink this. Dr. Harlan approved the supplements. You need strength." Gabriel took the glass but did not drink right away. Elena noticed that too. The pause, the faint tension near his mouth, the way his gaze moved from Valentina to the pale green shake in his hand. "How often does he take those?" Elena asked. Valentina's smile thinned. "When I give them to him, I'd like to see the ingredient list." "That would be unnecessary." "For therapy planning, it is necessary." Valentina set her hand lightly on Gabriel's shoulder. The gesture looked affectionate, but her fingers pressed down just enough to remind everyone watching who stood and who sat. "Elena, is it? You are hired for exercises. Nutrition and medication are handled by people with a higher level of responsibility." The insult was polite. That almost made it uglier. Gabriel looked up at Valentina. "Give her the list." For the first time, Valentina's expression flickered. Then she laughed softly. "Of course, darling, if it makes your new helper feel important." Elena said nothing. She watched Gabriel lift the glass and drink. That afternoon, his session collapsed. The change did not happen all at once. At first, he only seemed tired. Then his grip weakened on the bars. Sweat gathered too fast across his brow. His left foot dragged more than it had that morning. His focus faded in and out, and when Elena asked him a simple question, he answered a second too late. She ended the session early. Gabriel hated that. Said, "I can continue." "No, you can't. You don't decide that." "Today I do." He glared at her, breathing hard. "You enjoy giving orders in my house?" "No," Elena said, reaching for her blood pressure cuff. "I enjoy keeping my patients alive." His blood pressure was lower than it should have been. His pulse was uneven. Not dangerous yet, but wrong. Elena had seen wrong before. Wrong was a shadow on a scan before a diagnosis. Wrong was a patient smiling while their body quietly warned of collapse. Wrong was the tiny detail everyone ignored until it became the only thing that mattered. She wrote everything down. The next morning, she asked Carlo for copies of Gabriel's therapy reports. He brought them to her in a leather folder, neat and official. Elena sat alone in the small medical office near the East Wing and read every page with growing unease. The numbers were wrong, not obviously wrong. Whoever had changed them understood enough to be careful. Gabriel's standing tolerance had been reduced on paper. His balance scores had been marked lower than Elena recorded. His pain ratings had been increased. Notes she had never written appeared in clean medical language, suggesting emotional instability, poor cooperation, limited progress, and likely permanent impairment. Elena read the false report twice, then a third time. A soft chill moved through her. Someone inside the mansion was building a case that Gabriel Russo would never recover. Not just medically, legally, strategically. These reports were not meant to help him heal. They were meant to bury him alive while his heart still beat. She closed the folder just as the door opened behind her. Valentina stood there, smiling. "You are very dedicated," Valentina said. Elena turned slowly. "I like accurate records. So do I." For a moment, the two women looked at each other across the quiet room. Valentina's smile did not reach her eyes. Gabriel has always hated weakness. It is sad, really. A man like him, trapped in a body that cannot serve him anymore. The kindest thing may be to let him rest from all these impossible hopes. Hope is not impossible. "No," Valentina said softly, "but denial can be dangerous." Elena stood, holding the folder against her side. "Then it is good I know the difference." Valentina stepped closer. Her perfume was expensive and pale, like white flowers left too long in a cold room. Be careful, Elena. Houses like this are not hospitals. Here, people who ask too many questions often learn things they wish they had not. Elena felt fear move through her, quiet and real. But she did not lower her eyes. I was hired to help him stand, she said. That is what I am going to do. Valentina's expression sharpened for one brief second. Then she smiled again and walked away. Elena waited until the sound of her heels faded down the hall before she let out the breath she had been holding. Her hands were steady, but her heart was not. She looked down at the folder, at the false notes, at the quiet proof that something cruel was happening inside a house full of armed men who had failed to see the danger sitting at their own table. That evening, Gabriel was waiting by the windows when she entered. The river outside had turned black beneath the winter sky. The room was dim except for the soft gold light of a lamp near his chair. He looked tired again, too tired. A half-empty glass sat on the table beside him, pale green and sweating against the silver coaster. Elena stopped in the doorway. Gabriel noticed. What? She looked at the glass, then at him. How long after drinking that do you start feeling weak? His eyes narrowed. Why? Answer me. Something in her voice made him go still. Gabriel looked down at the glass, then back at Elena. Slowly, the anger in his face shifted into something colder, something awake. Elena walked forward and placed the altered reports on the table between them. I think someone wants the world to believe you are finished, she said softly. And I think they are making sure your body agrees. Gabriel did not speak. Outside the windows, the dark river moved silently past the mansion. Inside the room, the air tightened around them both, heavy with the shape of a truth neither of them could ignore anymore. And for the first time since she had entered Gabriel Russo's house, Elena saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of pain, not fear of death. Fear that the enemy who had almost destroyed him had never left the mansion at all. Gabriel stared at the glass on the table as if it had become a loaded weapon. The pale green shake looked harmless beneath the warm lamplight, almost gentle, with tiny drops of cold moisture sliding down the side. For weeks, maybe months, it had sat beside him like a symbol of care. Valentina had brought it with soft hands, soft words, and a soft smile that made the house believe she was the last loyal heart left near him. But now Gabriel looked at it and saw every strange wave of weakness that had followed. Every afternoon when his muscles failed too quickly, every evening when his hands trembled, every morning when his progress seemed to vanish like smoke. The enemy had not only come through his gates, the enemy had touched his shoulder, kissed his cheek, and called him darling. Elena did not move. She understood that some truths had to be allowed to land slowly, especially inside a man who had spent his life believing no one could get close enough to betray him. Gabriel Russo had protected himself with walls, guns, money, and fear, yet the deepest wound had come from trust. His face remained still, but his eyes changed. The first thing Elena saw was disbelief, then anger, then a quiet, terrible shame because part of him had known something was wrong but had been too exhausted to name it. How long? He asked. Elena came closer and opened the folder again. I don't know yet. The reports were changed at least 4 times. Your progress was lowered, your pain notes were exaggerated, and someone added statements I never made. Whoever is doing this wants a record that says you are unstable, uncooperative, and permanently impaired. Gabriel's jaw tightened. Valentina has access to my medical files. Yes, she sits with Dr. Harlan when he comes. Yes, she handles the supplements. Elena looked at the glass. Yes. Gabriel let out a quiet breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. I built an empire full of dangerous men, and I may have been taken apart by a woman carrying vitamins. No, Elena said softly. You were attacked while you were injured. There is a difference. His eyes lifted to hers. The anger in him was sharp, but her words reached beneath it. Elena could almost see him fighting the urge to cover his humiliation with cruelty. He had done that the first day. He had thrown pain at her because he did not know what else to do with it. But this time he did not insult her. This time he only looked tired. What do you need? He asked. It was the first time he had said those words to her without challenge. Elena picked up the glass with a tissue from her bag and sealed it inside a clear evidence pouch she used for medication checks. A sample tested by someone outside this house. Copies of your real medical records. Access to the security footage near the medical office. And your promise that you will not confront her before we know exactly what she is doing. Gabriel's hand curled into a fist on the armrest. You want me to sit here and let her think I am weak. I want you to survive long enough to expose her. I could have Carlo bring her here, and she would deny it. Then every person helping her would run. The records would disappear. The poison would disappear. She would become the grieving fiancé who only tried to care for a difficult man. Gabriel looked away toward the Black River. His reflection in the window looked ghost-like, half powerful and half trapped. You have thought this through. I have had to, Elena said. People like Valentina count on women like me being dismissed before we finish a sentence. His gaze returned to her, slower now. Women like you? The kind people underestimate. The kind they believe are too plain, too soft, too emotional, too large, too ordinary, or too far beneath them to matter. Something dark moved across his face. She said something to you. Elena did not answer. Gabriel's voice lowered. What did she say? It does not matter. It matters to me. The words were quiet, but they filled the room. Elena felt them more than she expected. She had trained herself not to need defense from men like him, not to wait for someone powerful to declare her worthy. But the way Gabriel said it was not empty gallantry. It sounded like recognition, like rage on behalf of something he had failed to see clearly until now. Elena closed the folder. She thinks I am too insignificant to stop her. Gabriel's eyes went cold. Then let her keep thinking that. The plan began that night in whispers. Carlo was the first person Gabriel trusted. The old house manager listened without interruption as Elena explained the altered records and the possible poisoning. His face did not change much, but grief passed behind his eyes. He had served Gabriel's father, then Gabriel, and the idea that betrayal had grown inside the family home struck him like a private failure. He gave Elena access to the security archive and quietly arranged for one of Gabriel's loyal doctors from Boston to test the shake. No one told Dr. Harlan, no one told the kitchen, no one told the guards who rotated near Valentina's rooms. The mansion continued breathing in its usual cold rhythm. But beneath that rhythm, Elena could feel the secret gathering strength. For the next 3 days, Gabriel became worse in public. It was not difficult to perform weakness because the weakness was already there, only not as final as Valentina believed. Elena reduced his visible therapy sessions and argued loudly enough for the hallway to hear. Gabriel snapped at her in front of staff. He refused exercises when Valentina passed by. Once he let his hand shake around a coffee cup until Valentina smiled into her phone, thinking no one saw. The house began to murmur. Some men lowered their voices when Gabriel entered. Others watched Valentina with new calculation, as if deciding where power would land when the chair became permanent. But at night, behind locked doors and covered cameras, Gabriel worked. Elena came to him after midnight when the mansion was quiet and the river outside looked like black silk. Carlo kept watch in the hall. A trusted guard disabled the motion alerts in the recovery room for 20-minute intervals. Under the low amber lights, Gabriel gripped the parallel bars and dragged his body through pain one breath at a time. He stood, he shook, he cursed under his breath. He fell back into the chair. Then he stood again. Elena stayed close enough to catch him and far enough to make him fight for balance. Her hands hovered near his ribs. Her stance stayed solid behind him. Sometimes he hated her for not making it easier. Sometimes he looked at her with something close to wonder, as if her faith in his body was becoming a second spine he could borrow, until his own remembered how to hold. On the 4th night, he stayed upright for 31 seconds. On the 5th, 46. On the 6th, he took one half step with his right foot and nearly collapsed from the shock of it. Elena caught him against her, his weight heavy and trembling. His breath broke near her ear. For a moment, he did not move. His back pressed against her chest, his hands locked around the bars, his whole body shaking from the terrible miracle of almost walking. "You moved," she whispered. Gabriel's voice was rough. I felt it. I know, he said, turning his head slightly. You do not understand. For the first time since the attack, I felt like my body was mine again. Elena swallowed. Then remember that feeling. Valentina does not get to take it from you. He looked back at her, and in that quiet room, with sweat on his face and pain in every line of his body, Gabriel Russo looked less like a feared boss and more like a man returning from a long, dark place where everyone had already buried him. Elena helped him back into the chair, and he did not pull away from her touch. His hand caught hers before she could step back. You should leave this house before the meeting, he said. Elena looked down at their joined hands. No, Elena. No, she repeated. I started this with you. I finish it with you. You do not know what these people are capable of. I know what poison looks like. I know what falsified records look like. I know what it feels like when powerful people think silence belongs to them. I am staying. Gabriel studied her, his thumb resting lightly against her knuckles. There was no softness in his world that did not come with danger attached, yet Elena was not soft in the way he had first assumed. She was steady earth, warmth with weight behind it, gentleness that could hold a man upright while his enemies waited for him to fall. I was cruel to you when you came here, he said. Yes, you should have walked out. I almost did. Why didn't you? Elena thought of the first time she saw him by the window, angry enough to burn the room down because he did not know how to grieve the body he had lost. She thought of every patient who had hidden fear behind insults. Every person who believed needing help made them less human. She thought of the way his hand had trembled around that first glass, long before either of them understood why. Because you were not finished, she said. Gabriel's eyes held hers for a long time. Then he lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her fingers. It was not a grand kiss. It was not a performance. It was quiet, careful, and full of a promise he did not yet know how to say. The proof arrived the next morning. The shake contained a slow-acting compound that would not kill Gabriel quickly, but would weaken his muscles, disturb his blood pressure, and worsen nerve inflammation over time. In a healthy person, it might have caused dizziness and fatigue. In Gabriel, already recovering from spinal trauma and toxic injury, it was enough to keep him from healing, enough to make every therapy session look like failure, enough to build a legal case that he was no longer fit to lead. The security footage gave them the second blade. Valentina entering the medical office alone. Valentina removing pages from a file. Valentina handing an envelope to Dr. Harlan near the east staircase. Valentina speaking with two capos from the family council in the West Garden after midnight. The final piece came from Carlo. Hidden in Valentina's private study, behind a locked drawer she had forgotten staff could access, he found unsigned transfer papers naming her temporary authority over Russo Holdings due to Gabriel's permanent incapacity. She had prepared everything. She did not want Gabriel dead, at least not yet. She wanted him breathing, humiliated, and legally erased from his own throne. When Gabriel read the papers, his face became calm in a way Elena found more frightening than anger. She wants a meeting, he said. Carlo nodded. Tonight, she has invited the senior men. She told them the doctor will confirm you are unfit to make decisions. Gabriel placed the papers on the table. Good. Elena looked at him. Tonight is too soon. No, he said. Tonight she believes she has won. That is the only time people like her tell the truth. The meeting was held in the old dining hall, the largest room in the mansion. The long table had been polished until it reflected the chandelier light like dark water. Men arrived in quiet groups, their faces serious, their voices low. Some had served Gabriel for years. Some had only served power and were waiting to see whose hand would hold it next. Valentina stood at the head of the table in a white suit, flawless and composed, her diamond earrings catching the light each time she turned her head. Dr. Harlan sat near her, pale and sweating. Carlo stood against the wall like a shadow. Elena waited outside Gabriel's room while he dressed. When the door opened, he was in a black suit for the first time since she had met him. The jacket sat sharply across his shoulders. His face was drawn from pain, but his eyes were clear. For a moment, Elena forgot the chair. She saw the man everyone else had feared before the attack. Then she saw the man beneath that too, the one who had fought in the dark for each second on his feet. "You do not have to stand unless the timing is right," she said. Gabriel looked at her. "I know, and if your leg fails, I will catch you." "I know that too." The words settled between them with strange tenderness. She walked behind him through the hall, one hand near the back of his chair, not pushing unless he needed it. The guards opened the dining hall doors. Conversation died as Gabriel entered. Every eye moved to him, then to Elena behind him. Valentina's gaze sharpened at the sight of her, but only for a second. Then her smile returned, polished and cruel. "Gabriel," she said softly, "you should be resting." "I have rested enough." A faint tremor moved through the room. Valentina stepped forward, her hand touching her chest, as if the pain of this moment belonged to her. "Everyone here loves you. That is why this has become necessary. Your condition is not improving. Your reports show decline. Dr. Harlan agrees that stress and leadership duties are making your recovery worse." Dr. Harlan swallowed. "In my medical opinion, Mr. Russo is not currently capable of managing complex affairs." Gabriel watched him without expression. "How much did she pay you?" The doctor went white. Valentina gave a soft laugh. "This is exactly what I mean, paranoia, anger, confusion. It breaks my heart to see you like this." Elena moved closer behind Gabriel. She could see his right hand gripping the armrest, not from weakness now, from restraint. Valentina turned to the men at the table. "I have prepared a temporary authority agreement. Gabriel will remain the heart of this family, of course, but decisions must pass through me until he is stable. It is what he would want if he could see clearly." One of the older capos leaned back. "And if he refuses?" Valentina looked down at Gabriel with perfect sadness. "Then we must accept that refusal as further proof he is unwell." The cruelty of it moved through the room like cold smoke. Elena saw some men shift uneasily. Others looked at Gabriel, waiting. Valentina placed the papers on the table in front of him and set a pen beside them. "Sign," she whispered. "Let me save what is left of you." Gabriel looked at the pen. Then he laughed once, low and quiet. Valentina's smile faded. "You were always too impatient," he said. Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me, you could have waited another month. You could have played the grieving angel longer. But you wanted the chair. You wanted the room. You wanted every man here watching me bow my head while you took what my family built." Valentina's face hardened. "You are embarrassing yourself." "No," Gabriel said, "you are." He turned his head slightly. "Elena." She stepped behind him. Every person in the room watched her. Valentina's eyes widened with sudden suspicion. Elena placed one foot behind Gabriel's chair and braced herself. Her hands moved to his sides, firm and certain, exactly as they had practiced. She leaned close enough for only him to hear. "Breathe first," she whispered. Gabriel inhaled. He adjusted slowly. "Push through your arms." His hands locked on the table edge. Now Gabriel Russo rose. The movement was not smooth. It was not easy. His legs shook. Pain flashed across his face, bright and brutal. Elena held him at the ribs, giving support without taking the moment from him. The room seemed to lose all sound. Men who had seen executions, betrayals, wars, and fortunes vanish sat frozen as the man they had been told was finished forced himself upright in front of them. Valentina stepped back as if the dead had reached for her. Gabriel stood, trembling but standing, his hands flat on the table, his shoulders high, his eyes burning with the cold fire of a king who had crawled out of his own grave. "Elena Moore," he said, his voice steady despite the strain, "recorded every true measurement from my therapy. She found the altered reports. She preserved the drink you gave me. The lab confirmed the compound inside it. Carlo has the footage of you entering the medical office and bribing Harlan. And these papers you wanted me to sign were found in your study before I was ever declared unfit." Valentina's face emptied of color. "That is a lie," she whispered. Gabriel looked to Carlo. "Show them." The screens along the wall came alive. Footage played without mercy. Valentina in the medical office, Valentina removing documents, Valentina passing money to Harlan. The lab report appeared next, clean and undeniable. Then the transfer agreement, dated and prepared in advance. Long before any official declaration, the room changed. It was subtle at first. A hand pulling away from Valentina's side of the table. A chair shifting back. A loyal man standing behind Gabriel instead of beside the woman in white. Power, Elena realized, moved like water. Once the slope changed, it rushed in the other direction. Valentina looked around and saw it happening. Her mask cracked. Beauty remained, but elegance vanished from it. What was left was rage. "You think she saved you?" Valentina hissed, pointing at Elena. "Look at her. She is a hired therapist, a nobody. You would choose that woman over blood, over reputation, over me?" Gabriel's body trembled harder. Elena felt it through her hands, but his voice did not weaken. "I choose the woman who stood behind me when everyone else waited for me to fall." Valentina's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Gabriel looked at the guards near the door. "Take her." 2 men moved at once. Valentina tried to step back, but there was nowhere to go. The room that had almost become hers turned against her with silent finality. Dr. Harlan began to stammer, begging before anyone even touched him. Carlo nodded to another guard, and the doctor was led out after her, pale and shaking. When the doors closed, the dining hall stayed silent. Gabriel remained standing for 3 more seconds, then 5, then 10. Elena felt the moment his strength began to break. She tightened her hold and lowered her voice. "Sit now." He did not argue. She guided him back into the chair with care, and this time no one in the room mistook the chair for weakness. They had seen what it cost him to rise. They had seen who made it possible. They had seen the truth of Elena Moore, the woman Valentina called nobody, holding up the most dangerous man in the family while every powerful man at the table bowed his head. Gabriel turned to them. His face was pale, his breathing rough, but his eyes were alive. "From this night forward," he said, "no medical decision, no recovery report, and no private access to me happens without Elena's approval. Anyone who disrespects her answers to me, anyone who questions her place in this house can leave now and never return." No one moved. Gabriel looked up at Elena. There was something in his eyes she had not seen before. Not possession. Not command. Trust. After the meeting, the mansion changed. Not loudly. Houses like that did not know how to change loudly. But Elena felt it in the way guards stepped aside for her without being told. She felt it in the way Carlo brought her the real records each morning with fresh coffee. She felt it in the way the staff stopped whispering when she entered a room. Valentina's flowers were removed from the halls. Her portrait disappeared from Gabriel's private sitting room. The pale green shakes were destroyed. Dr. Harlan's name vanished from the schedule as if it had never existed. Gabriel's recovery did not become magical overnight. Pain still came. Weakness still returned when he pushed too hard. Some mornings his leg refused him so completely that anger darkened his face before breakfast. But something had shifted. He no longer fought therapy as if Elena were his enemy. He fought beside her. He listened. He argued. He tried again. The first time he walked 3 steps between the bars, Carlo turned away and wiped his eyes. The first time Gabriel crossed half the room with Elena's arm braced around him. The guards outside pretended not to hear his broken laugh. The first time he stood at the window without touching the chair, Elena cried only after she was alone in the hall. Spring arrived slowly over the river. Ice loosened. The trees along the estate road began to green. Light stayed longer in the rooms that had once felt sealed against the world. Gabriel began holding meetings again. Sometimes seated, sometimes standing for a few minutes at the head of the table, while Elena watched from nearby, ready but no longer always needed. Men who once measured power in fear began to understand a different kind of strength, the kind that returned quietly, the kind that let itself be helped, the kind that did not need to crush every hand that reached for it. One evening, Elena found Gabriel in the recovery room alone. He was standing by the windows with one hand resting against the frame, looking out at the river. His chair waited behind him, close enough to use, far enough to prove a point. "You are supposed to call me before standing alone," she said. "I did." "No, you didn't. I thought about calling you." "That is not the same thing." He smiled faintly without turning. The expression still looked unfamiliar on his face, but less impossible than before. "Come here, Elena." She walked to him slowly. The sunset spread gold across the water, touching the scars at his temple and the silver threads beginning to show near his dark hair. He looked stronger than he had when she first entered the mansion, but not untouched. He would never be untouched again. Neither would she, perhaps. Some stories changed everyone inside them. Gabriel held out his hand. Elena took it. For a while they stood together in silence. His balance shifted once, and she moved instinctively closer. He did not need much help, only the smallest steadying touch at his side. Still, he covered her hand with his. "I thought strength meant never needing anyone," he said. Elena looked at the river. "Most people do. You taught me otherwise. You did the work. I would have stayed in that chair out of spite if you had not walked into this house and refused to be afraid of me." Elena smiled softly. "You were very rude. I was afraid." She turned her head toward him. Gabriel looked at her fully then. No cold mask, no sharp defense, no mansion full of men between them. "I was afraid that if you saw how weak I really was, you would look at me the way everyone else did." "I never saw weakness when I looked at you," Elena said. "I saw pain, and now I see a man who stood back up." His eyes moved over her face with quiet intensity. "And when I look at you, I see the woman who saved my life before I knew it was still worth saving." Elena's breath caught gently in her chest. Gabriel lifted her hand and pressed it against his heart. "Stay," he said. "Not because I command it. Not because this house needs you. Stay because I do." Elena looked at him, at the feared Gabriel Russo, who had once tried to cut her down with the same cruelty the world had used on her for years. He was still dangerous, still powerful, still surrounded by shadows, but he had learned to stand without stealing her strength. He had learned to honor it. "I will stay," she said, "but not as something you own." His mouth curved slightly. "No, and not as your secret. No, and not as the woman behind you that no one sees." Gabriel's hand tightened gently around hers. "Beside me," the words settled into the room like a vow. Months later, when Gabriel Russo entered the great hall for the first family gathering after Valentina's fall, he walked slowly with a black cane in one hand and Eleanor Moore at his side. The room stood before anyone was asked, not because he was fully healed, not because he was the same man he had been before the bullet. He was not. He walked with pain now. He moved with care. He understood the cost of every step. But that made the silence deeper, not weaker. Elena wore a deep blue dress that fit her body without apology. Her shoulders were back. Her curls fell softly around her face. She did not hide behind dark sweaters or professional distance. She did not need to. Every person in the room knew who she was. The woman who saw the poison. The woman who found the lies. The woman who held Gabriel Russo steady when his whole empire was waiting to see him fall. Gabriel reached the head of the table and remained standing. Then he looked at Elena. "Sit beside me," he said. Not behind him, not near the door, not in the corner where hired help waited to be dismissed. Beside him. Elena took the chair at his right hand, and no one questioned it. Outside, the river moved beneath the evening light, carrying away the last shadows of the winter that had almost ended him. Inside, the mansion no longer felt like a tomb. It felt awake. Not warm, perhaps. A house built by men like the Russos would always hold secrets in its walls. But now, somewhere beneath the marble and the iron, there was a heartbeat again. Gabriel looked at the men gathered before him, then at the woman beside him. His voice was calm, strong, and clear. "Let this family remember what happened here. Power did not save me, fear did not save me, blood did not save me. The woman you dismissed as ordinary saw what none of you saw. She stood when others bowed, she fought when others waited. She gave me back my life." Elena felt every eye turned toward her, but for the first time, the attention did not make her want to shrink. She met it calmly. She had spent too many years being told that her body made her less, that her softness made her weak, that her size made her something to overlook. But Gabriel had stood because her strength held him. Valentina had fallen because Elena had seen the truth, and the room now understood what she had always known quietly. Even when the world tried to make her forget it, strength did not always arrive sharp and cold. Sometimes it arrived soft, steady, and unafraid. Gabriel reached beneath the table and found her hand. Elena held it. The mafia boss, who had once believed his life was over, had learned to stand again. The therapist they had mocked had become the most trusted woman in his world. And in the guarded mansion above the river, where betrayal once moved like poison through silver cups and whispered reports, Elena Moore was no longer invisible, no longer unwanted, and no longer just the woman hired to help Gabriel Russo walk. She was the woman who helped him rise. And from that night forward, when people spoke of Gabriel Russo with fear, they spoke of Elena Moore with something even stronger: respect. The ruined cloak lay across the marble floor like a murdered shadow, its black velvet sliced open, its silver threads pulled loose, its moonstone beads scattered beneath a gold vanity where no one important was supposed to look. In the grand ballroom outside, Chicago's richest families waited with champagne in their hands, ready to smile at a woman they had never truly accepted. But in the private dressing room behind the Crestwell estate, Nadia Vale stood perfectly still, staring down at the thing she had spent months bringing back to life. 1 hour earlier, the cloak had been breathtaking. Now it looked wounded. And for one long, quiet moment, so did she. Nadia had always known how silence could cut deeper than a blade. She had grown up in the apartment above her grandmother's tailor shop on the west side of Chicago, where the heat rattled in the pipes during winter and the windows shook whenever the train passed. As a girl, she learned to fall asleep to the soft pull of thread through fabric, to the click of her grandmother's scissors, to the low murmur of women who came in carrying dresses too tight at the waist, jackets torn at the sleeve, wedding gowns yellowed by time and regret. Her grandmother used to say that cloth remembered everything. A sleeve remembered the arm that wore it. A hem remembered every step. A stain remembered the night it was made. Nadia believed her. By the time she was 12, she could repair a torn silk lining so carefully that the tear looked like a secret. By the time she was 25, museums called her when antique lace started to crumble. Collectors begged her to save beadwork from gowns older than their family names. And rich women handed her heirlooms with trembling fingers, trusting her hands while never quite trusting her presence in their homes. She was gifted. Everyone agreed on that when they needed her. They respected her patience, her eye, her steady hands, the way she could study a damaged piece of embroidery and somehow understand what the original artist had meant to do. But admiration always stopped at her wrists. Her hands were welcome in private archives, velvet-lined closets, and cold museum rooms, but the rest of her was treated like an inconvenience. She was too full-bodied for their idea of elegance, too soft at the waist, too round in the face, too wide in the hips, too brown from years of working-class sun and city grit, too honest with her eyes. Wealthy people liked her talent best when it stayed bent over a work table. Then Julian Crestwell came into her life like a polished invitation. He was handsome in that expensive, empty way old money men often were, with perfect hair, careful manners, and a smile that looked practiced in mirrors. He had brought her a torn 19th century shawl and watched her repair it by hand beneath the yellow light of her studio lamp. He said he had never seen anyone work like that. He said she had magic in her fingers. He said he loved that she was different from the women in his circle, that she was real, that she had a soul. Nadia had wanted to believe him. Maybe that was her first mistake. Maybe the heart could be clever with other people's broken things and still foolish with its own. For a while, Julian made her feel chosen. He took her to quiet restaurants where no one from his world would see them. He kissed her in the back of town cars and told her he hated how shallow society was. He listened when she spoke about fabric dyes, lost techniques, hand-sewn beadwork, and the slow death of craftsmanship in a world that wanted everything fast. When he proposed, the ring was old, heavy, and cold against her finger. Nadia told herself cold things could warm with time. But the Crestwell family never warmed. Julian's mother, Lenora, had the kind of beauty that felt sharpened, pale hair twisted at the nape of her neck, pearls resting at her throat like a warning, and eyes that measured everything for resale value. His sister, Celeste, was younger, prettier, and crueler, because she had never yet been punished for it. They smiled in front of Julian. They spoke softly when he could hear them, but when Nadia was alone with them, their voices became silk wrapped around wire. They asked if her grandmother's shop smelled like mothballs. They wondered aloud whether antique restoration was a real profession or just a charming hobby for women who could not marry well. They gave her diet advice she had not asked for. They sent her links to shapewear. They looked at her engagement ring as if Julian had accidentally dropped it in mud. Julian heard enough to know. That was what hurt most. He would come into a room after one of his mother's little cuts and pretend not to see Nadia wiping her eyes. He would squeeze her hand under the table when Celeste laughed at how heavily Nadia breathed climbing the staircase, but he never told his sister to stop. He would say later, in his soft, tired voice, that his family was difficult, that old habits took time, that Nadia had to be patient. She had been patient all her life, patient with customers who praised her stitches while staring at her body, patient with men who called her pretty for a big girl, patient with women who touched her arm and said she had such a beautiful face. But patience, like thread, could snap if pulled too hard. The engagement gala was supposed to fix everything. That was what Julian promised. He said once the announcement was public, once the city saw her at his side beneath the Crestwell chandeliers, his family would have to accept her. Nadia knew better, but hope had a dangerous little pulse. She wanted one night where she did not shrink, one night where she walked into the room not as the tailor's granddaughter, not as the big girl with clever hands, not as the strange woman Julian had brought home like a charity project, but as herself. That was why she chose the cloak. She had found it years earlier in a forgotten storage room beneath a closed theater near the river. The building was being cleaned before demolition, and Nadia had been hired to rescue a few old costumes for a small private collection. Most of them were ruined beyond repair, stained with mildew, chewed by insects, crushed under decades of dust. But at the back of a wooden trunk, wrapped in yellowing paper, she found black velvet so deep it seemed to drink the light. When she unfolded it, silver thread embroidery shimmered across the shoulders and collar in delicate curling patterns. Tiny moonstone beads caught the dim basement light and flashed like trapped stars. It was damaged, yes, but not dead. Nadia had bought it from the theater manager for almost nothing, carried it home in her arms, and kept it safe for years, waiting until she had the time and the courage to restore it properly. For the gala, she spent 3 months on it. Every night after client work, she sat beneath the lamp in her small studio and coaxed the cloak back into beauty. She cleaned the velvet with the slow care of prayer. She matched missing beads from antique dealers in 3 states. She strengthened the collar from beneath so the original stitching could hold. The work was so fine that sometimes she forgot to breathe. There was something strange about the embroidery, something almost musical in the pattern, though she could never quite name why. The silver lines did not move like ordinary decoration. They rose and fell with rhythm. They repeated in little phrases. Sometimes, when the city outside grew quiet, Nadia felt as if the cloak was trying to tell her something from very far away. On the night of the gala, she wore a deep charcoal dress that fit her body instead of apologizing for it. Her curls were pinned softly at the back of her head. Her lips were painted the color of red wine, and the cloak rested over her shoulders like moonlight made heavy. For the first time in years, Nadia looked in the mirror and did not begin with what the world had taught her to hate. She saw her own hands in the embroidery. She saw her grandmother's lessons. She saw every hour she had stayed awake, every stitch she had saved, every insult she had swallowed and turned into steadiness. She looked elegant, not because she had become smaller, because she had stopped asking permission to be seen. Lenora and Celeste found her in the dressing room 20 minutes before the announcement. At first, they only stared. Celeste's mouth twisted as her eyes slid over the cloak, the dress, the soft fullness of Nadia's body beneath the velvet. Lenora stepped closer, her perfume cold and floral, her smile thin enough to cut paper. She asked what Nadia thought she was wearing. Nadia answered calmly that it was an antique opera cloak she had restored herself. Celeste laughed, not a startled laugh, a mean one. She said it looked like something dragged out of a dead woman's closet. Lenora said Julian's guests expected taste, not theater scraps. Nadia tried to step past them, but Celeste moved in front of the door. The first bead came loose, with a small, bright snap. Nadia did not understand what had happened until she saw the tiny moonstone roll across the floor. Celeste was holding a piece of the embroidery between her manicured fingers, smiling as if she had plucked lint from a sleeve. Nadia's chest went cold. She told her to stop. Lenora's expression hardened. She said Nadia had already humiliated them enough by forcing Julian to parade her around like some noble little rebellion. She said no one wanted to see a fat woman pretending to be graceful in a costume. Celeste grabbed the cloak near the collar and pulled. Silver threads ripped with a sound Nadia would remember for the rest of her life. Then Lenora took the small sewing scissors from the vanity, the ones Nadia had brought for emergency repairs, and sliced into the velvet lining. The room became strangely quiet after that, not because they had stopped speaking, but because something inside Nadia had gone beyond sound. She watched Celeste tear loose more beadwork. She watched Lenora drop the scissors onto the vanity as if bored. They told her she should be grateful. They told her they had saved her from embarrassing herself. They told her Julian would thank them when he saw sense. Then they left her there with the ruined cloak at her feet, and music from the ballroom floating under the door like a cruel little dream. Nadia crouched slowly, her knees pressed into the cold marble. She touched the ripped velvet with trembling fingers. It felt like touching a wound. All those months, all that care, the hidden rhythm of the silver thread, the moonstones she had searched for, the secret beauty she had believed in. For a moment, grief rose so fast in her throat, she thought she might choke on it. She wanted to hide. She wanted to gather the ruined cloak into her arms and leave through the back hall, disappear into the freezing Chicago night, return to her studio, lock the door, and never again let anyone see how badly they had hurt her. Then her fingers found the cut Lenora had made across the lining. It was ugly. It was deliberate. It was meant to make the cloak unwearable. Nadia stared at it, and slowly her crying stopped. Her grandmother's voice came back to her, soft and firm as thread pulled tight. Damage tells the truth, Mija. Never cover it until you understand what it is saying. Nadia stood. Her hands were still shaking, but her mind had become still. She picked up the cloak and shook it once, letting the loose beads fall like tiny pale tears around her shoes. Then she took the silver pins from the vanity and fastened the torn velvet around her shoulders. The ripped lining showed. The missing embroidery showed. The broken collar showed. She did not fix any of it. She did not hide a single wound. When Nadia opened the dressing room door and walked into the ballroom, the first thing she noticed was the light. Hundreds of candles burned in glass holders along the walls. Crystal chandeliers glittered above a sea of black tuxedos, satin gowns, white teeth, and old family jewels. A string quartet played near the windows, soft and perfect, as if the room had never known an ugly thought. Julian stood near the center with a champagne glass in his hand, laughing with two bankers. Lenora and Celeste were beside him, both wearing the bright, satisfied calm of women who believed a problem had been solved. Then the room saw Nadia. The silence did not fall all at once. It moved through the ballroom in ripples. One conversation stopped, then another, until even the music seemed too loud. People turned. Eyes dropped to the cloak, to the ripped velvet, to the hanging silver threads, to the moonstone beads, still clinging in broken patches around Nadia's shoulders. It was impossible not to understand. This was not careless damage. This was violence done by delicate hands. And because Nadia wore it openly, because she walked with her chin lifted and her full body steady beneath the ruined masterpiece, the shame did not land on her. It spread outward, searching for the people who had made the wounds. Julian's smile died. He came toward her quickly, his handsome face tight with panic. Not concern, panic. Nadia saw the difference so clearly it almost made her laugh. He did not ask who hurt her. He did not ask if she was all right. He looked around at the watching guests, then leaned close and hissed that she needed to take it off. He said she was making a scene. He said this was not the time. His fingers closed around her arm, not hard enough to bruise, but firmly enough to remind her that he believed she still belonged to him. Nadia looked down at his hand, then she looked at his face. In that moment, the last soft thread tying her to him finally broke. She saw him fully, not as the man she had hoped he could become, but as the man he had always been. Julian Cresswell did not love her. He loved her talent when it made his world more beautiful. He loved the romance of choosing someone unexpected. He loved the way her devotion made him feel brave without requiring him to risk anything. But he did not love Nadia enough to stand between her and cruelty. He had never loved her enough for that. She reached for the ring. Before she could pull it from her finger, the grand ballroom doors opened. No servant announced the man who entered. No invitation had brought him there. Still, every person in the room seemed to know at once that something dangerous had crossed the threshold. Roman Sable walked into the Cresswell gala with the calm of a man who did not need permission from anyone alive. He wore a black suit cut so perfectly it looked less like clothing and more like armor. His dark hair was brushed back from a face made of sharp lines, tired eyes, and quiet threat. He was not the loud kind of powerful. He did not have to raise his voice. He did not even have to look angry. The room lowered itself around him. Nadia had heard his name whispered before. Everyone in Chicago had. Roman Sable, the man politicians denied knowing, and bankers never denied twice. Roman Sable, whose family controlled half the shadows under the city's cleanest streets. Roman Sable, who had buried enemies without staining his cuffs, and built an empire out of fear, loyalty, and grief no one dared mention. He should not have been there. And yet he walked forward as if the house already belonged to him. His eyes moved once across the crowd, cold and unreadable, then stopped on Nadia. No, not on Nadia, on the cloak. The change in him was so small most people might have missed it. A tightening near the mouth, a flicker behind the eyes. One breath held too long, but Nadia saw it, because she knew what damage looked like when someone tried to hide it. Roman came closer. Guests shifted out of his way without being asked. Julian's hand fell from Nadia's arm. Lenora went pale. Celeste stopped smiling. Roman stopped a few feet in front of Nadia and stared at the torn velvet around her shoulders. The room held its breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, smooth, and touched with something darker than anger. He asked where she had gotten his mother's cloak. Nadia felt the words move through her like cold water. His mother. The ballroom blurred at the edges. Julian started to speak, but Roman lifted one hand, and Julian's voice died in his throat. Roman's gaze remained on the silver embroidery, on the broken moonstones, on the hidden pattern along the collar that Nadia had spent months studying without understanding. His expression did not soften. It broke inward. He said her name then, not Nadia's, but another woman's. Isadora. The name changed the room. Older guests glanced at each other with sudden, frightened memory. A few looked down at their glasses. Someone near the windows whispered that Isadora Sable had been the most beautiful voice in Chicago before she vanished. Someone else whispered that she had not vanished, she had died. Roman heard them. Everyone knew he heard them. No one spoke again. Nadia stood in the center of all that wealth and fear, wearing a ruined cloak that had once belonged to a dead woman, while the most feared man in the city looked at her as if she had walked out of one of his nightmares, carrying the only piece of his heart he had never been able to bury. Nadia could not breathe for a moment. The whole ballroom had gone so still that even the candles seemed afraid to flicker. Roman Sable stood in front of her, staring at the torn black velvet around her shoulders, as if the dead had reached out and touched him through her. His face remained calm, but his eyes had changed. They were no longer cold, they were wounded, and the wound was old. Nadia looked down at the ruined cloak, at the loose silver threads trembling against her dress, at the moonstone beads hanging by broken strands, and she understood with a slow chill that this was no forgotten theater costume. This was a grave marker. This was a memory. This was something powerful people had tried to bury. Julian finally found his voice, though it came out thin and frightened. He told Roman there had to be some mistake. He said Nadia collected old things, and probably did not know where the cloak came from. He said it was only a costume, only fabric, only an unfortunate misunderstanding. Roman did not look at him. That was somehow worse than anger. It made Julian seem like a fly tapping against glass. Roman reached toward the cloak, then stopped before touching it, as if even his own hand did not have the right. His gaze lifted to Nadia's face, and for the first time that night someone looked at her without embarrassment, without pity, without calculation. He looked at her as if she were holding the last page of a story he had been reading in the dark for 20 years. Nadia swallowed, her throat tight. She told him she found it years ago in an old theater storage room before the building was torn down. She said she restored it herself. Her voice shook when she admitted it had been whole less than an hour ago. Roman's eyes moved slowly from her face to Lenora, then to Celeste. Neither woman spoke. Lenora's pearls rested against her throat like tiny white stones. Celeste had gone pale beneath her makeup. Roman looked at the scattered beads near Nadia's shoes, then at the torn lining, then at the small silver scissors still sitting on the dressing room table, visible through the open door behind her. He understood everything without needing to ask. That was the kind of man he was, the kind who did not waste time pretending cruelty was an accident. When Roman turned fully toward the Crestwells, the room seemed to grow colder. He said the cloak belonged to Isadora Sable, his mother, and the last time anyone in his family saw it, she was wearing it on the night she disappeared. A low murmur passed through the guests, soft and fearful. Roman let them whisper for a few seconds. Then he said Isadora had been betrayed, silenced, and erased by people who believed beauty was something they could own. His voice remained quiet, but every word landed like a door locking shut. He said the Crestwell family had not only humiliated an innocent woman in their own home, they had destroyed evidence tied to the death of a Sable. Lenora tried to apologize then, because fear had finally taught her the shape of manners. She stepped forward with both hands lifted, her voice trembling in a way Nadia had never heard before. She said she did not know. She said it was a tragic mistake. She said she would pay any amount to repair the damage. Celeste began crying, but her tears looked angry, not sorry. Roman watched them both with a dead calm that made the apology feel smaller and smaller until it vanished in the space between them. He said money could not buy back reverence. Money could not sew dignity into a woman after it had been torn away for sport. Then he looked at Nadia and asked, in front of everyone, if she wanted to stay in this house one more minute. Nadia looked at Julian. His face was full of panic, but not love. He wanted the room fixed. He wanted Roman satisfied. He wanted his mother forgiven and his sister protected and Nadia quiet. She saw all of it with painful clarity. The ring on her finger suddenly felt heavy, not like a promise, but like a lock. She pulled it off slowly. The small sound it made when it hit the marble floor was sharper than any scream. She told Julian she would not marry a man who watched her bleed and worried only about the carpet. His mouth opened, but no words came. Nadia stepped away from him, the ruined cloak shifting around her shoulders like a dark pair of wings. Roman did not touch her as they left. He walked beside her, not ahead, not dragging her behind, and that small thing almost broke her more than the cruelty had. His men appeared from places Nadia had not noticed, silent and severe, opening doors, clearing halls, lowering their eyes when she passed. Outside, the Chicago night was cold and shining with rain. Roman's black car waited at the curb, its windows dark as ink. Before Nadia got in, she looked back at the Crestwell estate. Through the tall windows, she could see the guests standing frozen beneath the chandeliers, their elegant faces full of dread. She had entered that house hoping to be accepted. She left it carrying a dead woman's secret and the attention of the most feared man in the city. The fall of the Crestwell family began before sunrise. Roman did not need shouting, threats, or blood in the street. He made phone calls in a voice soft enough to be mistaken for boredom. By morning, investors withdrew from Crestwell Holdings. A bank delayed a critical loan. A shipping contract vanished. A private donor cancelled a museum wing Lenora had been bragging about for months. Men who once laughed with Julian over whiskey stopped answering his calls. Women who had praised Celeste's charity work crossed the street rather than be seen beside her. Chicago society loved cruelty when it happened quietly in dressing rooms. It became much less charming when Roman Sable pointed a light at it. Nadia heard pieces of this over the next few days, while she sat in her small studio above her grandmother's old shop. The ruined cloak laid carefully across her work table. Roman had sent it back with a note written in dark ink. He did not command. He asked. He said he believed a cloak held something his mother had left behind, and he believed Nadia was the only person alive who could find it without destroying what remained. The note was formal, almost distant, but at the bottom he had added one sentence that stayed with her. He wrote that whatever price she named would be paid, but her yes or no belonged only to her. That was why she went to him. Roman's mansion sat beyond a line of iron gates, on a quiet street where old trees leaned over the road like watchmen. It was not flashy. That surprised her. She had expected gold, marble, something loud enough to match the stories people told about him. Instead, the house was dark stone, old wood, and deep silence. Inside, the air smelled of cedar, rain, and books. Roman led her not to a sitting room, but to a private archive beneath the house, where temperature-controlled cases held photographs, records, gowns, letters, and stage posters from Isadora Sable's life. Nadia stopped in front of one photograph and felt her chest tighten. Isadora stood on a stage in the same black cloak, young and radiant, her head tipped back as if she was singing to the moon. Roman stood beside Nadia, but kept his eyes on the photograph. He said his mother had been famous before his family became a name people feared. She sang in theaters, private salons, charity halls, anywhere her voice could fill a room. She was loved by strangers and used by family. He had been a boy when she vanished. The official story was illness, then accident, then nothing at all. Stories changed when powerful men needed them to change. Roman had spent most of his life searching for proof, but all he ever found were rumors, deaths, dead ends, and men too scared to speak. The cloak disappeared the same night she did. He always believed it had been destroyed. Nadia touched the edge of the velvet with gloved fingers. She told him the cloak had not wanted to die. Roman looked at her then, and something passed between them, quiet and strange. He did not smile, but his eyes softened in a way that made him look suddenly younger. Nadia looked away first, because softness from a dangerous man could be more frightening than a threat. The restoration began slowly. Roman gave her a room in the archive with every tool she requested and several she did not know existed. He brought in antique thread under guard, moonstone beads from private dealers, photographs of Isadora wearing the cloak from every angle his people could find. But Nadia worked alone. She made that clear. Roman accepted it. He visited at night, always quiet, always watching from a respectful distance as she mapped the damage. At first, Nadia thought the silver embroidery was only decorative. Then she noticed the pattern again, the rhythm that had haunted her before the gala. It repeated in sections around the collar, rose across the shoulders, and disappeared beneath the lining in careful loops. It was too deliberate to be ornament. It felt like music trapped in thread. She asked Roman for recordings of Isadora's final performances. He brought them within the hour. Nadia listened with headphones while studying the embroidery under magnification. Isadora's voice poured into her ears, rich and aching, beautiful enough to make the room feel haunted. Nadia followed the notes with one finger over the silver lines. High note, long stitch. Low note, tight curl. Pause, bead, repeat. Her breath caught. The cloak was not just embroidered, it was coded. Someone with steady hands and desperate hope had hidden a message inside the music. For days, Nadia barely slept. She worked with tea growing cold beside her, with silver thread shining beneath her lamp, with Roman moving in and out of the room like a shadow that had learned patience. She wrote notes across paper, pinned photographs to boards, matched stitch lengths to musical phrases, and slowly the message began to surface. It was not clean. The damage had broken parts of it. Lenora and Celeste had torn through several lines, but the heart of it remained. The message named Victor Sable. Roman was standing behind her when Nadia understood. Victor was his uncle, the man who had raised him after Isadora died, the man who had taught him how to survive, how to rule, how to punish, how to never let grief show on his face. Nadia felt the room tilt. Roman did not speak for so long that she turned to look at him. He was staring at the paper in her hand. His face had emptied. That scared her more than rage would have. He looked like a man watching the floor disappear beneath his feet. There was more. Nadia made herself continue, though every word felt heavier than the last. Isadora had known Victor planned to betray her, because she had discovered he was using the family's theaters to move money, weapons, and people through the city. She had hidden proof in the cloak, and encoded her final words through the aria she was supposed to sing that night. The last part was not about Victor. It was for Roman. Nadia read it softly, her voice shaking. Isadora begged her son not to let grief hollow him out. She told him fear could protect him for a little while, but it could not love him back. She asked him not to become a monument to the people who destroyed her. Roman turned away before Nadia finished. His hand braced against the edge of the table. For one terrible second, she thought he might break something. Instead, he broke silently. His shoulders shook once. Then again, Nadia had seen rich women cry over ruined silk, and old men cry over war medals sewn into jacket linings, but she had never seen a man like Roman Sable cry. It was not loud. It was worse. It was the sound of a lifetime finally losing its lock. Nadia went to him slowly. She did not know if touching him was wise. She did it anyway. Her hand settled gently on his back. Roman went still beneath her touch, as if kindness had become a language he barely remembered. Then he turned and pulled her into his arms, not like a man claiming something, but like a drowning man reaching for shore. Nadia stood there, soft and solid and real, holding the most feared man in Chicago, while his mother's voice played faintly through the headphones on the table. After that night, something changed between them. Roman still had guards at every door, and enemies in every shadow, but with Nadia he became careful. He asked before entering her workspace. He brought her dinner, and pretended not to notice when she forgot to eat. He listened when she spoke about fabric, not with the bored patience of a wealthy client, but with the focus of a man learning sacred law. Nadia, who had spent her life being asked to shrink, found herself growing in the quiet of his house. She laughed more. She argued with him. She told him when he was being impossible. The first time she did, his guards looked ready to faint. Roman only stared at her for a moment, then gave the smallest smile she had ever seen. But secrets do not stay buried just because they are finally loved. Victor learned the cloak had returned. Nadia did not know how at first. Roman suspected a leak inside an old family channel, What they did not know was that Celeste Crestwell, bitter and desperate after her family's ruin, had reached for the first powerful hand willing to use her. She blamed Nadia for everything, not her mother's cruelty, not Julian's weakness, not her own hands tearing the cloak. Nadia. She gave Victor the one thing he needed, Nadia's schedule, gathered from a former Crestwell driver who still had friends near Roman's staff. The attack came on a rainy evening while Roman was across the city, meeting with men who owed him answers. Nadia was alone in the archive with 2 guards outside the hall. She was repairing one of the torn silver sections when the lights flickered. A soft click sounded from the door. Not loud, not dramatic, just wrong. Nadia lifted her head. The air changed. She knew it before she saw the first man step inside. He wore black gloves and carried a gun low at his side. Another followed, then another. Nadia's heart slammed against her ribs, but her hands did not freeze. She had spent a lifetime repairing fragile things under pressure. Panic was a luxury for people who did not work with silk, older than their grandmothers. She moved fast, grabbing the cloak and pulling it against her body. The first man ordered her to put it down. Nadia backed toward the emergency alarm beneath the work table, the one Roman had installed after she complained that 3 locks were not a personality trait. The man lunged. Nadia slammed her palm against the alarm. The archive exploded with sound. The men cursed. One grabbed her arm, hard enough to bruise. Nadia twisted, using the heavy cloak to blind him for half a second. A gunshot cracked into a glass case behind her. She dropped low, protecting the velvet beneath her body as alarms screamed through the mansion. One of the guards outside shouted. Another shot answered him. Nadia crawled behind the work table, clutching the cloak to her chest, whispering to it as if it were alive, as if Isadora herself could hear. Not again. They are not taking you again. Roman arrived like a storm given human shape. The doors crashed open, his men flooding in behind him. The attackers tried to run. None made it past the hall. Roman found Nadia beneath the work table, shaking, her arms wrapped around the cloak, broken glass glittering in her hair. For one breath, he looked ready to become every monster his mother had feared. Nadia saw it happen. She saw grief turn to rage, rage turn to hunger, hunger reach for blood. She said his name. That was all. Roman stopped. Nadia crawled out slowly. Her arm hurt. Her cheek was scratched. Her whole body trembled with the aftershock of fear. But she stood in front of him and reminded him of Isadora's message. She told him Victor wanted to turn him into proof that cruelty won. Killing him would be easy. Becoming different would be harder. Roman looked at her for a long time, breathing like a man holding back fire with his teeth. Then he lowered his gun. What followed was not mercy. It was something colder and more lasting. Roman exposed Victor to the city above and the city below. Documents reached federal investigators. Audio files reached men Victor had betrayed. Bank accounts froze. Safe houses emptied. Allies vanished. The criminal world, which forgave many sins, did not forgive a man who murdered family and hid behind a grieving boy. Victor was not killed. He was abandoned, stripped of money, power, protection, and name. When authorities took him, no one called a lawyer, no one made a deal, no one remembered loving him. Celeste was arrested 2 days later. She screamed Nadia's name as cameras flashed outside her apartment building, her perfect hair loose around her face, her old confidence gone. Lenora retreated from society. Julian left Chicago before the end of the week. The Crestwell name, once polished and untouchable, became a warning people lowered their voices to repeat. Nadia did not celebrate. She had learned too much about damage to mistake ruin for healing. The cloak took another month to finish. Nadia did not restore it the way it had been before. She could have hidden Lenora's cuts. She could have matched the black velvet so carefully that no one would ever know where Celeste's hands had torn the beadwork. But that felt like another lie. Instead, Nadia repaired every wound with bright gold thread. She stitched the cuts openly, carefully, beautifully, letting gold seams run through the black velvet like sunlight through a storm cloud. She replaced the missing moonstones, but left small spaces where the original pattern had been lost forever. She strengthened the silver music around the collar and preserved Isadora's message beneath a protective layer, not hidden in shame anymore, but guarded with honor. When the cloak was finished, it was more beautiful than it had been before. Not perfect, better than perfect. It carried its history honestly. Black velvet, silver song, pale moonstones and gold scars. Isadora's grief was there. Roman's survival was there. Nadia's hands were there. The cruelty that tried to destroy it had become part of its power, not because cruelty deserved beauty, but because Nadia knew how to take the knife marks of the world and refused to let them have the final word. The private unveiling was held in Roman's archive. No Crestwells, no gossip-hungry society guests, only historians, textile experts, a few trusted artists, and people who understood that some objects were not objects at all. They stood around the cloak in reverent silence, studying Nadia's work with awe. One museum director whispered that the restoration was extraordinary. Another said the gold repairs were a masterstroke. Nadia accepted their praise with grace, but she did not bend beneath it. She no longer needed strangers to decide whether she was worthy of standing in the room. Roman watched her from across the archive. He wore black, as always, but something in him had changed. The sharpness remained, the danger remained, but the emptiness had loosened. When the guests finally drifted away, leaving them alone with the cloak glowing softly beneath the lights, Roman came to stand beside Nadia. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Roman told her she had restored more than his mother's cloak. His voice was low, rough at the edges. He said she had restored the part of him that still knew how to feel, without turning feeling into violence. He said he had spent his life becoming feared because fear seemed safer than loss. Then Nadia walked into a ballroom, wearing his mother's pain on her shoulders, and taught him that broken things were not asking to be hidden, they were asking to be seen correctly. Nadia looked at the cloak, then at him. She told him he had done something for her too. He had not saved her from being fat, or poor, or different, because those things had never been the problem. He had saved her from mistaking other people's shame for truth. Roman's eyes softened. He touched her face with the careful wonder of a man handling something sacred, not fragile. Nadia leaned into his palm because she wanted to, not because he demanded it. The kiss that followed was quiet. No ballroom watched them. No family judged them. No enemy waited behind the door. It was not a claim made in anger or fear. It was a promise made in peace. Roman kissed her like a man choosing life after years of living beside a grave. Nadia kissed him back like a woman who had finally stopped apologizing for the room her heart and body needed. In the end, Nadia kept the cloak. Roman insisted. He said Isadora would have wanted it with the woman who had listened to it when everyone else only saw fabric. Nadia hung it in a glass case inside her new restoration studio, not far from the old tailor shop where her grandmother had once taught her that cloth remembered everything. People came from museums, theaters, and private collections to see her work. They spoke her name with respect now, but Nadia did not let respect turn her into someone distant. She still repaired torn hems for neighborhood women. She still kept tea on the stove. She still touched every piece of fabric as if it had a soul. Sometimes, late at night, Roman would find her standing before the cloak, studying the gold seams. He would come up behind her, wrap his arms around her soft waist, and rest his chin against her hair. The city outside remained dangerous. Men still whispered his name. Doors still opened when he approached. But with Nadia, he no longer needed to be only a shadow. And Nadia, once treated like an embarrassment by people who mistook cruelty for class, stood taller than any of them ever had. She had walked into a room wearing damage, and she had turned that damage into truth. She had taken a ruined cloak, a dead woman's message, a wounded man's heart, and her own long-buried worth, and stitched them into something no one could ever tear apart again. Because broken things were not worthless, scars did not erase beauty, and real love did not ask Nadia Vale to become smaller. It stood beside her in the dark, looked at every torn place, and asked her to rise. A casino could hide almost anything beneath enough gold light. It could hide fear behind laughter, dirty money behind polished marble, and broken people behind the sound of spinning wheels and falling cards. On the night Dante Russo reopened the Grand Bellagio Casino, every chandelier burned like a small sun, every glass of champagne sparkled like a promise, and every smile in the room looked expensive enough to trust. But deep beneath the music, beneath the velvet ropes and the soft shuffle of cash, there was a quiet mistake waiting to destroy the most feared man in the city. And the only person who could see it was Marina Vale, a fat accountant no one bothered to notice. Marina sat alone in the back finance office, far from the glowing main floor where the beautiful guests laughed under crystal lights. Her desk was small, her chair was old, and the humming computer in front of her had been working harder than most of the people who wore custom suits upstairs. She had been there since sunrise, checking numbers, comparing wire reports, and building the final financial packet for the grand reopening. Outside her office, the casino sounded alive. Machines sang, dealers called bets, heels clicked across marble, and the house orchestra played a soft, smoky jazz tune that made everything feel richer than it really was. Marina had always liked numbers because numbers did not laugh at her. Numbers did not stare at the size of her hips when she walked into a room. They did not whisper when her chair creaked or when she adjusted the loose black cardigan she wore over every blouse. Numbers were honest. They either matched or they did not. They either told the truth or they revealed the lie hiding behind it. People were harder. People smiled while stealing from you. People called you helpful when they needed your work and embarrassing when they did not. No one had taught Marina that lesson better than Victor Lang. Victor was the casino's finance director, though half the reports with his name on them had been created by Marina. He was handsome in the clean, cruel way that made people forgive him before he even apologized. He had smooth blonde hair, sharp suits, and the kind of smile that looked warm from far away but cold up close. Years ago, before Marina understood how easily attention could turn into a cage, Victor had dated her. He had told her she was smart. He had told her she was different. He had told her he liked that she was not like the other women in the casino, not loud, not flashy, not desperate to be seen. Then, slowly, he started teaching her how small he wanted her to feel. He made jokes about her clothes. He asked if she really needed dessert when they went to dinner. He told her she would look better if she tried harder. When she cried, he said she was too sensitive. When she pulled away, he said no one else would put up with her. And when she finally ended it, he punished her in the only way he knew would hurt most. He took her work, put his name on it, and let the whole casino believe he was the genius keeping Dante Russo's empire clean. Marina stayed because she needed the job. She stayed because her mother's medical bills had not disappeared just because her pride was wounded. She stayed because she knew the casino's books better than anyone alive, and somewhere deep inside, under the hurt and shame, she believed the truth had weight. Maybe it sank slowly, but it always sank. That night, the Grand Bellagio had been polished until it looked unreal. The casino sat in the center of the city like a palace built for sin, all black glass, gold trim, and glowing fountains that sprayed water high into the cold night air. News cameras waited outside. Politicians stepped from black cars with fake smiles ready. Celebrities floated through the entrance in silk and diamonds. Men with quiet eyes and hard hands stood along the walls, pretending to be security while everyone with sense knew they belonged to Dante Russo. Dante was not just the owner of the casino. He was the reason the city stayed polite after dark. His name moved through rooms before he did. Men lowered their voices when they said it. Women looked over their shoulders when they heard it. People called him a businessman in public, but in private they called him the man who could close a street with one phone call, and open a judge's door at midnight. He was feared because he never raised his voice. He did not need to. His silence did more damage than most men's threats. Marina had seen him only a handful of times from a distance. He was tall, dark-haired, and always dressed as if the world had been tailored around him. He moved through the casino with calm control, never rushed, never surprised. His eyes were the dangerous part. They were black and patient, like he could look at a person and already know what secret they were trying to bury. Marina avoided those eyes whenever possible. Men like Dante Russo did not notice women like her unless something had gone terribly wrong. By 8 that evening, something had gone terribly wrong. At first, it was small. A transfer line in one of the reopening accounts carried a processing delay that should not have existed. Marina leaned closer to her screen, the blue light washing over her tired face. The casino had dozens of accounts, some clean, some complicated, and some Marina had learned not to ask questions about. Her job was not to judge the river. Her job was to know where it flowed. And one small stream of money, hidden under vendor payments for imported marble and luxury liquor, had shifted in a way that made the hair on the back of her neck rise. She clicked deeper. The numbers were clean. Too clean. That was the first warning. Real money always left fingerprints. Fees, timing gaps, exchange marks, tax notes, routing shadows. But this set of transactions had been scrubbed smooth, almost beautiful in its perfection. Marina's breath slowed. She forgot the music outside her office. She forgot the tight pull of her cardigan across her stomach. She forgot the ache in her lower back from sitting all day. Her mind narrowed around the pattern. Someone had been stealing from the casino. Not a little, not careless pocket money. This was a careful bleed. A quiet drain spread across months of vendor accounts and private tables, hidden inside rounding adjustments and luxury service costs. Whoever built it knew enough to fool an outside audit, but not enough to fool Marina. Her fingers moved faster. She opened side reports Victor had approved that afternoon. She compared them to the raw backup files she kept on a secure internal drive, the one Victor did not know about because he never cared how she made him look brilliant. The difference was there. Small at first, then larger, then impossible to ignore. Victor had altered the executive reports before sending them upstairs. He had changed the numbers Dante Russo would see. Marina's mouth went dry. Then she found the second layer. The stolen money was bad. The data transfer was worse. Hidden beside the financial leak was a quiet export file, encrypted and timed to send during the grand reopening ceremony. It was aimed at an outside server connected to the Bellini family, Dante's old rivals across the river. Marina stared at the screen, her heart suddenly pounding so hard it hurt. Victor was not just stealing. He was selling Dante Russo's financial map to people who wanted him weak. If that file finished sending, the rival family would know where the casino held its reserves, which accounts moved fastest, which shell vendors protected the private money, and which emergency routes Dante used when pressure came from law enforcement. In the wrong hands, the information was not just expensive. It was a loaded gun. Marina reached for the keyboard, but the office door opened before she could begin locking the file down. Victor walked in with a champagne glass in one hand and a satisfied smile on his face. His tuxedo fit him perfectly. His gold cufflinks flashed under the fluorescent light like tiny warnings. "There you are," he said. "I should have known you'd still be hiding back here." Marina quickly minimized the screen, but Victor's eyes had already sharpened. He stepped closer, his smile thinning. "What are you working on?" he asked. "The final vendor reconciliation," Marina said, keeping her voice quiet. Victor set the glass on her desk and looked over her shoulder. His cologne wrapped around her, too familiar and too sharp. She hated that her body still remembered the old fear before her mind could stop it. "I already sent the final packet to Dante's people," he said, "so there's no reason for you to touch anything else. There are errors." His face changed so quickly that someone else might have missed it. Marina did not. The smile stayed, but the warmth died. "Errors?" he repeated softly. "In the vendor accounts," she said, "and in the private table reserve reports." Victor laughed once, low and mean. "Marina, this is a big night. Don't do this. Do what? Try to make yourself important. The words landed exactly where he aimed them. For a second, Marina was back in restaurants where he ordered salad for her without asking. Back in elevators where he stepped away from her body like closeness embarrassed him. Back in all the small moments when he trained her to apologize for existing. He leaned down until his mouth was close to her ear. "You're good with spreadsheets," he whispered. "That's it. Don't confuse that with power." Marina swallowed, but she did not look away from the screen. Someone is moving casino money into outside accounts. Victor straightened. "And someone is sending encrypted financial data to a Bellini server," she said. The office became very quiet. Then Victor grabbed her arm. His fingers dug into the soft flesh above her wrist, hard enough to make her gasp. "Listen to me," he said, the polished mask finally slipping. "You are going to close whatever you opened. You are going to come upstairs with me, smile, and let me present the reopening report like we planned. If you say one word to anyone, I will make sure every person in this casino knows you tried to sabotage the biggest night of Dante Russo's life because you're bitter I left you." Marina's eyes burned, but she forced herself to breathe. "You didn't leave me," she whispered. "I escaped you." For one dangerous second, Victor looked like he might hit her. Then the intercom on her desk buzzed, making both of them freeze. A woman's voice spoke through the speaker. "Mr. Lang, Mr. Russo is asking for you in the main hall. He wants the finance presentation now." Victor released Marina's arm and fixed his sleeves. Just like that, he became smooth again. "Come on," he said. "You're going to stand where you belong. Behind me." The main gambling hall was brighter than daylight and twice as cruel. Every corner gleamed. Gold lamps spilled soft light over green felt tables. Champagne moved through the crowd on silver trays. Guests laughed as if nothing ugly could ever touch them. Marina followed Victor through the room, pulling her cardigan close as heads turned, not because they saw her, but because she was walking beside someone important. On the raised platform near the center of the casino, Dante Russo stood with the mayor, 2 state senators, several wealthy investors, and men Marina knew had no official titles but plenty of power. Dante wore a black tuxedo with no tie, his white shirt open at the throat, his expression calm and unreadable. He looked like a man at ease inside danger. Victor stepped onto the platform with easy confidence. Marina remained at the edge, half hidden behind a column wrapped in white roses. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor began, lifting his glass, "tonight is more than a reopening. It is proof that the Grand Bellagio is stronger, cleaner, and more profitable than ever before." Applause filled the hall. Victor smiled wider. Marina's stomach twisted as he presented her numbers, her charts, her projections, her work. He spoke each line as if the intelligence had come from him, as if he had spent nights alone in the back office, finding every weak point and sealing every leak. The crowd listened with admiration. The mayor nodded. Investors leaned in. Even Dante watched carefully, his dark eyes resting on Victor with quiet focus. Then Victor turned slightly, and his gaze found Marina. "Of course," he said with a small laugh, "none of this happens without a support team. Even our back office staff has tried very hard to keep up." A few people chuckled politely. Marina felt cold spread through her body. Victor gestured toward her. "Marina, come here." She did not want to move, but the entire room was looking now. She stepped forward, feeling the weight of every stare on her body, her clothes, her round face, her trembling hands. Victor smiled at her like a man offering kindness. "Marina handles basic accounting support for us. Nothing too complex, but she tries. And tonight I think she got a little overwhelmed. Big numbers can be stressful when you're not used to this level of business." Soft laughter moved through the platform. Marina's cheeks burned. Victor placed a hand on her shoulder, heavy and false. "She came to me earlier with some confusion about the accounts. I told her not to worry. We all have our limits." The laughter grew. Someone near the front whispered something about her cardigan. Another voice murmured that she looked like she belonged in payroll, not on the floor. Marina heard it all, every word, every tiny cut. Victor leaned closer to the microphone. "But let's give her a hand for effort." Applause came, thin and mocking. Marina stood under the lights, humiliated in front of the richest and most dangerous people in the city. Her throat tightened. For one painful moment, she wanted to disappear so badly it felt like a prayer. Then the applause stopped. Not slowly, all at once. Dante Russo had raised his hand. The whole casino fell silent. He stepped away from the mayor and walked toward Marina. The crowd parted without being asked. Victor's smile stiffened, but he held his ground. Dante did not look at him. He looked only at Marina. For the first time in all the years she had worked inside his casino, Dante Russo truly saw her. His dark eyes moved over her face, not with pity, not with disgust, but with a sharp, unsettling interest that made the room feel smaller. He looked at the handprint Victor had left on her arm. He looked at the tears she was fighting not to shed. Then his gaze shifted to the report in Victor's hand. "These projections," Dante said quietly, "are advanced." Victor smiled too fast. "Thank you, Mr. Russo." Dante still did not look at him. "I wasn't speaking to you." The words moved through the room like a cold wind. Victor's face tightened. Dante held out his hand toward the report. Victor gave it to him. Dante flipped through the pages slowly, his expression unreadable. The reserve movement model, the risk timing, the vendor protection sequence. "You expect me to believe you built this?" Victor laughed nervously. "Of course. My department handled all of it." Dante finally turned his head and looked at him. The room seemed to lose heat. "Your department," Dante said, "or Marina Valle?" Marina stopped breathing. Victor's smile broke for half a second. Only half a second, but Dante saw it. Dented looked back at her. "Miss Vale," he said, his voice calm, deep, and impossible to ignore. "Did you find something wrong with my numbers tonight?" Every instinct told Marina to stay quiet. Victor was powerful. Dante was worse. The Bellini file was still moving somewhere beneath the surface, counting down in the dark. But as she stood under the casino lights, with every cruel eye waiting for her to shrink, something inside her changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was softer than that. A small locked door opening in the deepest part of her. She lifted her chin. "Yes," she said. Victor's hand tightened around his champagne glass. Dante's eyes sharpened. "What did you find?" Marina looked past Victor, past the guests, past every person who had ever decided her body made her less worthy of being heard. Then she looked at Dante Russo and told the truth. "Someone is stealing from you," she said. "And before this night is over, they are going to hand your casino to your enemies." For a moment, nobody inside the Grand Bellagio casino moved. The music kept playing somewhere behind the velvet curtains, soft and slow, but it sounded far away now, like a memory from another life. Marina stood beneath the bright lights, with her hands trembling at her sides, her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. She had said the words. She had opened the door. Now there was no safe place left to hide. Victor let out a sharp laugh, but it came too quickly and sounded too thin.
"That is insane,"
he said, turning toward the guests with a wounded smile. "Mr. Russo, she is embarrassed. She has always had a problem with pressure. Marina gets emotional, and when she gets emotional, she invents problems that do not exist." Marina felt the old fear try to rise. It was familiar, almost comforting in its ugliness. Victor had always known how to make her doubt herself in public. He spoke with confidence, and people trusted confidence. He wore expensive suits, and people trusted expensive suits. Marina wore a loose cardigan and had a soft body that shook when too many eyes landed on her, so people assumed she was the one who did not belong. But Dante Russo did not look convinced. He stood close enough now that Marina could see the faint shadow along his jaw and the cold patience in his eyes. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He simply held out the finance report and said, "Show me." Victor's smile froze. Marina looked at Dante, then at the tablet still clutched in Victor's hand. "I need access to the main system." "Absolutely not," Victor snapped. "This is private financial infrastructure." Dante turned his head slowly. "It is my private financial infrastructure." The words were quiet, but they landed like a door locking. Victor swallowed. "Of course, I only meant that this is not the place. We have guests, investors. The mayor is standing right there." "The mayor can wait," Dante said. A few people shifted nervously. The politicians who had spent the evening smiling beside Dante suddenly became very interested in their champagne glasses. The wealthy guests leaned toward each other, whispering behind manicured hands. The casino staff gathered near the edges of the hall, their faces bright with curiosity and fear. For years they had watched Marina carry files, lower her eyes and disappear behind office doors. Now the whole room was watching her stand before the most dangerous man in the city while Victor Lang began to sweat. Dante looked toward one of his guards. "Bring the secure console." Within seconds, 2 men rolled a black glass workstation onto the platform. It looked nothing like the old computer in Marina's back office. The screen was wide and polished, the keyboard silent, the security scanner glowing with a blue light. Dante placed his hand on the scanner, and the system opened with a soft tone. He stepped aside. Marina stared at the console. Her body felt too warm under the lights. Her cardigan clung to her arms. She could hear the small, cruel whispers in the crowd, the same kind she had heard her whole life. She could almost hear Victor's voice in her head telling her not to embarrass herself, not to act like she belonged there, not to forget what she looked like. Then Dante's voice came quietly beside her. "Take your time, Miss Vale." No one had ever said those words to her in a room like this. Not like that. Not with trust. Marina stepped to the console and placed her fingers on the keys. The moment she touched the system, the room around her faded. The lights, the gowns, the tuxedos, the whispers, Victor's pale face, even Dante's dark presence beside her all became distant. Only the numbers remained. They opened in layers, clean on the surface, rotten underneath. She pulled up the vendor accounts, then the imported liquor payments, then the marble restoration fees, then the private gaming reserve transfers. Every time she opened a new file, the pattern grew clearer. "This account was created 6 months ago," she said, her voice soft at first. "It is listed as a luxury service vendor, but it has no tax history, no real payroll, no operating address, and no proof of service. It received small payments at first, then larger ones, always under the approval limit, always at the end of the month when the audit volume was highest." Victor stepped forward. "That proves nothing. Vendors are created all the time." Marina did not look at him. "This vendor account shares routing behavior with 3 others, different names, same hidden endpoint. They all pass through a secondary clearing account before the funds leave the casino." The screen changed as she typed. Lines of money appeared like glowing veins under the casino's beautiful skin. Dante's jaw tightened. "How much?" he asked. Marina swallowed. "A little over 18 million so far." The hall went completely still. Victor's face drained of color. "She is lying." Marina opened another window. "I have the approval logs." Victor moved so suddenly that 2 guards stepped forward at once. He stopped, lifting both hands as if he were offended by the idea that anyone would think he was desperate. "Those logs can be altered," he said. She had access. She could have done this herself. Marina finally looked at him. For years, Victor had made her feel like every room belonged to him. Every conversation, every promotion, every compliment, every piece of work she created somehow became another brick in the tower he stood on while he looked down at her. But now, with Dante Russo beside her and the truth glowing on the screen, Victor looked smaller than she had ever seen him. "No," she said. "I could not have done this under my credentials. The approvals were signed with your biometric key." Victor laughed again, but this time no one laughed with him. Marina kept typing. "And because you were worried someone might question the vendor files, you copied sections of my original reports and built your altered reports on top of them. You changed the reserve lines, but you forgot the background formulas." She opened the comparison file. 2 reports appeared side by side. One had Marina's name hidden in the metadata. The other had Victor's executive signature across the top. "That is my work," she said. "This is the version I built. This is the one he sent to Mr. Russo. The formulas match until the theft begins. Then Victor's version breaks away and hides the missing money under reopening expenses." The screen made the truth look simple, almost gentle, but everyone in the room understood what it meant. Victor was not the genius. He had never been the genius. He had been standing on Marina's shoulders while calling her useless. A soft murmur moved through the crowd. Casino employees who had once mocked her now stared at her with wide, uneasy eyes. The mayor stepped back. The investors looked at Victor as if he had become poisonous. Marina saw one of the senior managers, a woman who had laughed at her dress last Christmas, lower her gaze in shame. But Marina was not finished. She pulled up the encrypted export file. "This is worse," she said. Dante leaned closer. His shoulder almost brushed hers, and somehow the warmth of him steadied her instead of frightening her. "What is it?" he asked. "A data transfer scheduled to complete during the reopening toast," Marina said. "It is sending your reserve map, private account structure, emergency routing sequence, and internal vendor protections to an outside server." Dante's expression did not change, but the air around him seemed to darken. "Whose server?" he asked. Marina took one slow breath. "The Bellini family." The name moved through the casino like a blade under silk. Men who had been pretending not to listen suddenly stopped pretending. A few guests quietly began moving toward the exits, but Dante's guards closed the doors with smooth, silent efficiency. Victor's control broke. "You stupid woman," he hissed. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. The whole room heard Dante turn toward him. Victor seemed to realize too late what he had done. "I mean, she is creating panic. She does not understand what she is touching. I was managing a delicate relationship. You were selling me to my enemies," Dante said. "No," Victor said quickly. "No, I was protecting the casino. Bellini approached me, yes, but I was feeding them false data. I was giving them controlled information so we could track them." Marina shook her head. "That is not true." Victor's eyes cut to her. "Shut up." Dante moved before the room could breathe. He did not shout. He did not grab Victor. He simply stepped between him and Marina, and that was enough. Victor took a step back. Dante looked at Marina over his shoulder. "Can you stop the transfer?" She looked at the countdown hidden in the corner of the file. Less than 4 minutes remained. "Yes," she said. Then she hesitated. "But if I only stop it, they will know we found it. They may already have people waiting to move money out of linked accounts." Dante's eyes sharpened. "What do you need?" "Full control. No restrictions. No one interrupting me. You have it." Victor let out a bitter sound. "You are giving her control of the casino accounts? Are you insane?" Dante did not even look at him. "No. I am finally speaking to the person who understands them." Something in Marina's chest cracked open. She turned back to the console. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with a speed that made the screen blur. The Bellini transfer had been designed to move quietly, dressed as a data backup, but Marina could see the shape of it now. It was hiding behind a mirror process, copying not just account data but live access keys that would give the rival family a brief window to push into Dante's reserves. Victor had not just betrayed him. He had handed the enemy a key and chosen the loudest night of the year to open the door. Marina built a wall first, not a simple block, because a simple block would warn them. She rerouted the transfer into a sealed internal loop, letting the Bellini server believe it was still receiving information. Then she stripped the export file clean from the inside, replacing real account maps with dead structures and false access routes. The money routes closed one by one. The reserve accounts locked. The vendor shell protections froze. Every stolen connection Victor had sold began collapsing quietly in the dark. The crowd watched without understanding the details, but they understood the feeling. Marina was no longer the embarrassed woman under the lights. She was calm now, focused, powerful in a way that did not need beauty, volume, or permission. Dante watched her as if the rest of the casino had disappeared. Victor watched her like a man watching his own grave being dug. The countdown reached 10 seconds. Marina's last command executed. The screen flashed once, then the Bellini connection died. A soft tone filled the console. Marina exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. "They are locked out." No one spoke. She opened the final screen. "And I traced the theft accounts." Victor closed his eyes. Marina's voice did not shake now. The stolen money moved through 3 vendor shells, then into a private holding account under the name VL Strategic Consulting. The final withdrawal request was scheduled for tonight after the reopening speeches. Victor was going to empty the account and let the Bellini family attack your reserves while everyone blamed the system failure on me. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of judgment. Dante took one step toward Victor. Victor lifted his hands. Dante, listen to me. We can fix this. She is making it sound worse than it is. I gave this place everything. I made the reports. I handled the investors. I stood in front because she could not. Look at her. You think they would trust someone like Marina with an empire? Dante stared at him, then he smiled. It was not warm. That was your mistake, Dante said. You thought power had to look like you. Victor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Dante turned to his guards. Take him downstairs, keep him alive. I want every account, every message, every name he gave the Bellinis. 2 guards seized Victor by the arms. He struggled at once, all polish gone, his shoes scraping against the platform. Marina, he shouted, panic twisting his voice. Tell him this is a mistake. Tell him I helped you. You owe me. Marina looked at the man who had stolen her confidence piece by piece and called it love. She looked at the man who had taught her to hide her body, lower her voice, and hand over her brilliance like rent for being tolerated. No, she said softly. I do not owe you anything. Victor's face crumpled with rage as the guards dragged him away. His voice echoed through the hall until the heavy security doors closed behind him, cutting him off completely. For a long moment, Marina stood frozen at the console. Then the casino erupted, not in laughter this time, not in whispers. In applause, it started somewhere near the back, small and uncertain. Then it spread across the hall until it became thunder. Dealers clapped, servers clapped. Investors clapped because they understood they had just watched their money survive. Even the mayor clapped with a stiff, nervous smile. Marina stood in the center of it all, overwhelmed by the sound. She had imagined being seen many times in her life, but never like this. Never under gold lights with the most powerful people in the city looking at her not as a joke, not as a burden, but as the woman who had saved the entire room. Dante stepped beside her and lowered his voice so only she could hear. You just saved my empire. Marina looked down, old habit pulling at her. I only did my job. His hand came gently under her chin, lifting her face before she could hide. His touch was careful, almost reverent. No, he said. You did the job of every person who failed to deserve you. Her breath caught. Dante turned to the crowd, his hand still near Marina, not holding her in place, only making it clear she was no longer alone. From this moment forward, he said, his voice carrying through the hall without effort, Marina Vale answers directly to me. She is no longer back office staff. She is my personal financial strategist. Every account in this casino goes through her. Every executive report bears her approval. Anyone who disrespects her, questions her place, or speaks to her the way Victor Lang did will answer to me. No one doubted him. Marina heard a soft gasp from the staff near the bar. She saw fear move across faces that had once dismissed her. But more than fear, she saw recognition. The kind that came too late, but still came. The reopening ceremony continued because casinos did not stop for broken men. The orchestra began playing again, softer this time. Champagne was poured. Reporters were told a finance director had been removed due to internal misconduct. The guests slowly returned to their tables, though every few seconds someone looked back at Marina, like they were trying to understand how they had missed her. Dante did not leave her side. He led her away from the platform, through a private corridor lined with dark mirrors and gold trim. The noise of the casino faded behind them until only the soft sound of their footsteps remained. Marina expected him to bring her to an office, maybe to ask more questions, maybe to demand the full account of every file she had touched. Instead, he opened the door to a quiet balcony overlooking the casino floor from above. From there, the Grand Bellagio looked like a living thing. Lights moved across the tables. Cards flashed. Dice rolled. People cheered without knowing how close the whole glittering world had come to falling apart. Marina wrapped her arms around herself. What happens to Victor? Dante stood beside her. He will give me the names I need. She nodded slowly. She did not ask more. She did not want the details. Victor had chosen Dante's world, and Dante's world had answered him. For a while, they simply watched the casino breathe. Then Dante removed his jacket and placed it gently around Marina's shoulders. It was warm, heavy, and smelled faintly of cedar and expensive soap. "You do not have to hide anymore," he said. Marina gave a small, tired laugh. "That sounds easy when you say it." "It will not be easy," Dante said, "but it will be true." She looked at him then, really looked at him, the feared man of the city, the owner of the palace below, the criminal prince in a black tuxedo who could terrify a room into silence. But in that quiet moment his eyes were not cruel. They were steady, curious, almost gentle. "Why did you believe me?" she asked. "Everyone else believed Victor." Dante looked back through the glass at the casino. Because Victor enjoyed being admired more than he understood the work. Men like that always polish the surface. They never know what lives underneath. His gaze returned to her. "But you knew. You watched everything. You carried the truth alone. That kind of mind leaves fingerprints." Marina's eyes stung. For so long, she had believed love meant becoming smaller so someone else would not feel ashamed of her. She had believed safety meant being invisible. She had believed her body was something to apologize for before anyone else could insult it. But tonight, under the lights of Dante Russo's empire, the very things people used to dismiss her had hidden the mind that saved them all. "I am tired of oversized clothes," she whispered. Dante's mouth curved slightly. "Then do not wear them." "I am tired of acting like I should be grateful for a seat in rooms I built." "Then take the room." She looked at him, and something like courage warmed her from the inside. "And if people stare?" Dante stepped closer, his voice low and calm. "Let them. The casino belongs to me, but from tonight on every eye in it will learn to respect you." The next morning the city woke to rumors. No one knew the whole truth, but everyone knew something had happened at the Grand Bellagio. Victor Lang had vanished from the executive roster. The Bellini family's men were seen leaving their club before sunrise with pale faces and urgent phones. Several accounts tied to outside vendors were frozen. By noon, Dante Russo's casino was stronger than it had been the night before, and a new name was moving through the private conversations of powerful people, Marina Weil. 1 week later, Marina returned to the main floor not in a loose black cardigan, but in a deep emerald dress tailored to her body instead of hiding it. The fabric rested softly over her curves, fitting her waist, her hips, her arms, everything she had once tried to bury under layers of shame. Her hair fell around her shoulders in dark waves. She wore simple gold earrings and carried a black folder containing the new financial structure of the casino empire. The room noticed. This time Marina did not shrink. Employees stood straighter when she passed. Executives who once spoke over her now moved aside. The same guests who had laughed at Victor's cruel jokes now watched her with careful respect. She could still feel the nerves inside her. Confidence did not erase years of pain in a single night. But she walked anyway. One step, then another, through the gold-lit casino that no longer felt like a place built to ignore her. Dante waited at the center of the floor near the private tables. When he saw her, everything in his expression stilled. He looked at her the way the casino looked at money, the way dangerous men looked at power, the way the city looked at something it did not yet understand, but already feared losing. Marina stopped in front of him. "Your new reserve model is ready," she said. Dante accepted the folder, but his eyes stayed on her. "Our reserve model." Her heart gave a quiet, startled beat. He turned toward the gathered executives. "You will follow her instructions exactly. If Marina says an account closes, it closes. If she says money moves, it moves. If she says a man cannot be trusted, I do not want him inside my walls." No one argued. Marina looked out across the casino. The machines sang. The cards whispered. The money moved. And beneath it all, she could feel the hidden system she had rebuilt. Stronger now, cleaner now, protected by her own hand. Victor had wanted to use her brilliance as a shadow. Instead, he had forced it into the light. That night, as the Grand Bellagio glowed against the city skyline, Marina stood beside Dante Russo in the high private office overlooking the floor. Far below them, people gambled with fortunes they could not afford to lose. But Marina no longer felt like one of them. She was not waiting for luck. She was not asking to be chosen. She had become the mind behind the empire, the woman who saw every weakness, every lie, every hidden door. Dante came to stand behind her, close but not crowding her. His reflection appeared beside hers in the dark glass. "They will fear you now," he said. Marina watched her own reflection, the full face, the soft body, the steady eyes. For the first time, she did not look away. "Good," she said softly. Dante smiled. And beneath the gold lights of the most dangerous casino in the city, the woman everyone had mocked finally stopped hiding. Marina Vale did not become powerful because Dante Russo protected her. She became powerful because she had always been powerful, and he was simply the first dangerous man smart enough to kneel before the truth. The quiet accountant was gone. In her place stood the brilliant queen of Dante Russo's casino empire, feared by enemies, respected by every room she entered, and impossible to ever ignore again. The grand ballroom of the Aurelia Grand had seen presidents, heiresses, movie stars, and men powerful enough to make a city lower its voice, but it had never gone this silent for a woman holding a crown of white roses. Sabine Mercer stood alone beneath the cold spotlight, her hands steady around the delicate flowers, while behind her, on a screen wider than a theater wall, strangers laughed at photographs of her body. The images had been stolen while she worked, twisted into something cruel, and dressed up as entertainment for a room full of people who claimed they believed in confidence. Sabine did not cry. She did not run. She only looked toward the woman smiling on stage, then toward the camera, streaming her humiliation to thousands of glowing phones, and said in a calm voice that made the room feel colder, "My husband will want to understand what your version of empowerment looks like when the woman in front of you has nothing you want." No one in that ballroom knew what those words meant. No one knew that the husband they were laughing about was Roman Caldero, the most feared man in the region, a man whose name could turn crowded rooms quiet and make powerful men answer their phones on the first ring. No one knew that the soft, round woman in the black work dress, standing with flower dust on her fingers and pain hidden behind her eyes, belonged to a world far more dangerous than theirs. They saw a floral designer. They saw a hotel worker. They saw a fat woman they believed had no way to defend herself. They made the mistake so many people had made with Sabine Mercer. They thought quiet meant weak. Before that night, before the lights went black and the screen came alive with cruelty, Sabine had built a life out of beauty no one noticed closely enough. She worked at the Aurelia Grand, one of the oldest luxury hotels in the city, a massive stone building with arched windows, brass elevators, marble staircases, and stories tucked into every carved corner. Rich guests came there to be seen. Brides came there to feel royal. Politicians came there to smile beside donors beneath crystal chandeliers. Influencers came there because the light looked expensive. But Sabine came before sunrise, when the lobby was empty and the hotel smelled faintly of polished wood, old velvet, and coffee being brewed somewhere behind the kitchen doors. She loved the building most when it was quiet. In those early hours, before voices filled the halls, Sabine would guide carts of flowers through the service entrance, her arms full of orchids, garden roses, tulips, anemones, branches, greenery, ribbon, wire, and glass bowls still cold from storage. She moved with practiced patience, even when the carts were heavy, even when a junior assistant forgot the vases, even when a bride changed her mind 3 hours before a ceremony and decided she hated pink. Sabine never raised her voice. She solved things. That was what people depended on her for. If a floral arch leaned to one side, Sabine fixed it. If a groom's mother demanded more lilies because she had seen them at a royal wedding, Sabine found lilies. If careless guests knocked over table arrangements while taking selfies, Sabine quietly rebuilt them before anyone important noticed. Her work had been photographed in magazines, blogs, society pages, and wedding films that cost more than most cars. Her hands had built flower walls behind famous singers, long garlands for political dinners, and centerpieces so lush they looked like gardens had grown out of silver bowls overnight. Yet when guests praised the room, they usually praised the planner, the hotel, the bride, the brand, or the family that paid for it. Sabine's name stayed behind the curtain, hidden in invoices and staff schedules. She was used to that. Sometimes she even preferred it. Beauty, to her, did not become less real because no one knew who made it. Sabine was not bitter, though life had given her plenty of reasons to be. She was a confident, fat woman, and confidence had not come to her like a gift. It had come like a house she built by hand, after other people kept throwing stones through the windows. Since childhood, strangers had treated her body like it was public property. Women in stores had offered advice she did not ask for. Men had looked past her until they needed something. Doctors had blamed everything on her size before listening to a single sentence. At parties, people had called her brave for wearing color, as though existing without shame was an act of rebellion. Sabine had learned young that some people could not see a woman if they were too busy measuring her. But she had also learned that the world did not get to decide the whole truth about her. She liked herself in soft clothes and structured dresses. She liked the strength in her hands, the curve of her hips, the way her laugh filled a room when she trusted the people inside it. She did not apologize for taking up space. She had spent too many years watching smaller people carry uglier hearts. So she moved gently, but not timidly. She spoke kindly, but not weakly. She listened more than most people, and because of that, she knew things others missed. She knew when a bride was scared. She knew when a rich man was lying. She knew when an event director was smiling while planning to blame the staff. She knew when a room was about to turn cruel. The only part of her life she kept truly hidden was Roman. Roman Caldero did not belong to the soft world of flowers and ribbon, though Sabine sometimes thought he understood beauty better than anyone. To the city, he was a name wrapped in rumor. On paper, he owned construction firms, private security companies, waterfront properties, labor consulting businesses, and investment groups that always seemed to win the right contracts at the right time. Off paper, everyone knew his reach went much further. Trucks moved when Roman wanted them moved. Buildings rose when Roman allowed them to rise. Men who smiled too boldly in public lowered their eyes when he entered a room. He had the rare kind of power that did not need noise. Roman never shouted when a quiet sentence could do more damage. People called him cold. Sabine knew better. Roman was controlled. There was a difference. Cold people felt nothing. Roman felt everything, then chose what the world was allowed to see. He could sit across from a dangerous man and listen for an hour without moving more than his thumb against a glass. He could end a business relationship with one soft line. He could make a room full of men feel hunted without lifting his hand. But with Sabine, he was different, in ways no one would have believed. He remembered the flowers she hated because they smelled too sharp. He heated her side of the bed when she worked late. He kept tea in his office because she liked it after long hotel events. He watched her build arrangements with the same focus other men gave to war maps. They had married in secret nearly a year earlier, inside an abandoned greenhouse Roman had restored for her. The place sat on the edge of one of his old properties, a forgotten glass structure that had once been broken, gray, and full of weeds. Sabine had mentioned it only once, saying it was sad to see a place made for growing things left to rot. 2 months later, Roman brought her there at sunset. Every pane of glass had been repaired, the ironwork had been cleaned, the cracked stone floor had been washed until it shone in patches. Vines climbed the walls. Hundreds of white flowers glowed under hanging lights. It looked like a secret the earth had decided to keep. There were only 4 people there with them: a lawyer with careful hands, Roman's elderly housekeeper, Lucia, who cried into a lace handkerchief before Sabine even reached the aisle, and 2 trusted associates who stood near the doors with respectful distance and watchful eyes. Sabine wore a cream dress with sleeves that brushed her wrists, and Roman wore a dark suit with a white rose pinned to his jacket because she had placed it there herself. When he took her hands, his own were steady, but his eyes were not. For once, Roman Caldero looked almost afraid, not of enemies, not of death, of being given something good enough to lose. Sabine was the one who insisted the marriage stay private. Roman hated the idea at first, not because he wanted the city to talk. He cared little for gossip. He hated it because secrecy felt, to him, too close to denial. He did not want to hide her. He wanted every man and woman in his world to know that Sabine was his wife, and that disrespecting her would be the last mistake they made with his patience. But Sabine had held his face between her hands and told him the truth. She did not want doors opened because people feared him. She did not want clients praising her work because they were scared not to. She did not want hotel managers suddenly treating her like royalty because they knew who waited for her at home. "I need to know what I earned," she had told him inside that glowing greenhouse. "Not what your name forced people to give me." Roman had gone quiet for a long time. Then he kissed her forehead and agreed. But he asked one thing of her. If anyone ever truly harmed her or humiliated her, she would tell him. Not every rude comment. Not every small insult from a bored rich guest with too much champagne and too little kindness. Something serious. Something that cut deeper than an ordinary bad day. Sabine agreed only after Roman made his own promise. He would not answer every insult with violence. That promise mattered to her. Sabine loved the man, not the shadow people feared. She understood the life he lived, even if she did not ask for every detail. She knew there were parts of Roman's world that could not be softened just because he loved flowers through her eyes. But she also knew anger could dress itself up as protection. She did not want to become an excuse for his worst instincts. Roman understood that, even when it cost him. So for nearly a year, their two worlds stayed separate. Sabine left their home before sunrise with coffee in a travel mug. Roman kissed her in the kitchen, one hand at her waist, always lingering like he did not enjoy letting her walk out into a world that did not know to be careful with her. At lunch, he called her. Every day. Sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 20. He would ask if she had eaten, and she would ask if he had slept, and both of them would lie a little if the truth would worry the other. The arrangement worked, because Sabine wanted it to work. She liked being ordinary at the hotel. She liked training younger staff members, who came in nervous and left standing taller. She liked proving that patience could be powerful. She liked the smell of wet stems and fresh petals. She liked the moment before an event opened, when all the tables were set, all the candles waited unlit, and the room held its breath before becoming someone else's memory. Then Vivienne Sloane booked the Aurelia Grand. Vivienne was not simply famous, she was followed. There was a difference, and Sabine knew it the moment she saw the event file. Vivienne had millions of followers who watched her skincare routines, her morning affirmations, her closet tours, her speeches about confidence, and her carefully filmed acts of public kindness. She had built a brand around women supporting women, around body acceptance, around entering every room like you belonged there. Her new fashion and wellness company was launching with a charity event meant to raise money for women seeking careers in fashion. The ballroom would be filled with celebrities, sponsors, stylists, editors, donors, and cameras. Everything would be streamed live. On paper, it sounded beautiful. In person, Vivienne was exhausting. She arrived 2 days before the event wearing white sunglasses indoors, followed by a small army of assistants, photographers, brand managers, and one boyfriend, who looked like he had learned confidence from never being corrected. Grant Hollis was handsome in an expensive, empty way, with perfect hair, a watch too large for his wrist, and the relaxed arrogance of a man whose family name had opened doors before he learned how to knock. The Hollis family owned one of the largest development companies in the region, and the whispers around the hotel said they were trying to secure Roman Caldero's support for a waterfront project that would make them richer than they already were. Sabine heard the name Caldero spoken more than once in lowered voices during setup. Grant boasted near the bar that final approval was practically done. Vivian told one of her assistants she wanted to film a celebration after the deal. Neither of them had any idea that Roman's wife was kneeling 10 feet away, wiring white orchids into a circular frame while pretending not to hear. Sabine did not react. She rarely did. She had become an expert at keeping her face peaceful while other people revealed themselves. The trouble began with the flower wall. Vivian wanted it moved 6 inches to the left, then 8 inches to the right, then back where it had started because the light was better from her good side. Sabine's team moved it without complaint. Then Vivian decided the hanging wisteria looked too romantic and not empowering enough. Sabine adjusted the design. Then Vivian said the roses were too full and made the space look heavy. Her eyes dropped to Sabine's body as she said the word heavy, and one of her assistants looked away fast, embarrassed but silent. Sabine only nodded. I can soften the shape. That calm seemed to irritate Vivian more than anger would have. She wanted resistance, or shame, or a stumble she could turn into a clip. By the morning of the event, her comments had sharpened. When Sabine climbed a ladder to secure a ceiling garland, Vivian laughed lightly and asked if the hotel had extra insurance for that. When Sabine carried a large arrangement through the ballroom, Vivian told her to move faster, then added that maybe the buffet should be placed farther away so staff would not get distracted. Grant chuckled at that, low and mean, without bothering to hide it. Sabine's younger assistant, Mara, froze with a bucket of stems in her arms. Sabine saw the hurt on the girl's face and shook her head once, gently. Do not feed it. That was what the look meant. Some cruelty grew larger when given attention. Some cruelty, Sabine had learned, was a performance waiting for an audience. Malcolm Reed, the Aurelia Grand's event director, watched from near the ballroom doors with a tablet against his chest. He saw enough. Sabine knew he saw enough, because he avoided her eyes each time Vivian said something cruel. Malcolm was a polished man with silver hair, narrow glasses, and a permanent smile that never reached his cheeks. He loved the hotel's reputation more than the people who kept it alive. Vivian's event was worth a fortune. Her stream would put the Aurelia Grand in front of millions. To Malcolm, one floral designer's dignity weighed less than that kind of exposure. By late afternoon, the ballroom had transformed into a dream. White flowers climbed the walls in waves. Pale gold candles lined the tables. The stage held a crescent of roses and branches so delicate it looked like moonlight had turned into something living. Sabine stood at the back of the room, tired and aching, with small cuts on her fingers and a streak of green on her wrist from crushed stems. She was proud of the work. Even Vivian, for one brief second when she thought no one was watching, looked around with satisfaction. Then her eyes landed on Sabine, and the satisfaction turned into something colder. You'll stay out of the main photos, right? Vivian asked. Sabine looked up from the floral crown she was repairing. My team will be behind the service doors unless we're needed. Vivian smiled. Perfect. It's just about keeping the visual language clean. Grant leaned against the stage steps and gave Sabine a slow look that made her skin tighten. Smart. Luxury has a certain standard. Sabine tied the last ribbon on the crown. The flowers were rare, pale and fragrant, with tiny pearls hidden between the petals. The crown is ready. Vivian's smile brightened in a way Sabine did not trust. Wonderful. We'll need you to bring it out during the main presentation. Personally, the model will be waiting center stage. Sabine hesitated only a moment. Something about the request felt wrong. Usually, items for the stage were handed off to production staff, but the room was busy, the timeline was tight, and Malcolm stood nearby, nodding as if this had been approved. Of course, Sabine said. Evening fell against the tall windows, and the Aurelia Grand filled with glittering guests. Cameras flashed, music floated through the ballroom. Women in silk dresses and men in dark suits moved between flowered tables, holding champagne and speaking in polished voices. Vivienne was everywhere at once, kissing cheeks, touching shoulders, laughing toward cameras, promising the night would be about courage, visibility, and every woman's right to feel beautiful. Sabine watched from behind the curtain, with the floral crown in her hands. Her feet hurt, her back ached, but she was almost done. In another hour, she could go home. Roman would be waiting, probably pretending to read reports while listening for the door. He would look up the moment she entered, and his face would soften in that private way that belonged only to her. She could already feel his hand at the back of her neck, his voice asking how the event went. She would tell him it was difficult, but fine. She had told him that before. Difficult, but fine. It was a useful phrase. It kept peace. A stage manager waved at her. "You're on." Sabine lifted the crown carefully and stepped into the ballroom. At first, no one paid much attention. Vivienne stood on stage, glowing beneath warm light, speaking into a microphone about confidence and the courage to be seen. The live comments flowed across a smaller monitor near the front. Hearts, flames, praise, little bursts of worship from people watching through screens. Sabine walked toward center stage as instructed, holding the crown with both hands. Then the lights went out. A gasp moved through the ballroom. Sabine stopped walking. For one breath, there was only darkness, thick and sudden. Then a spotlight opened above her, bright and white and merciless. Sabine stood in the center of the room. Behind her, the enormous screen flickered. A photograph appeared. It was Sabine from that morning, climbing the ladder, her body caught from a low, ugly angle. The image had been stretched, edited, sharpened in all the wrong places. A caption appeared beneath it, pretending to be playful, comparing her to the floral installation she had been building. Laughter broke out from one side of the room, uncertain at first, then louder when another image appeared. Sabine carrying roses, Sabine bending near the stage, Sabine eating a granola bar beside a bucket of stems during her only break of the day. Each picture had a caption worse than the last. Decorations, buffet, furniture. A woman turned into a joke by people who had smiled while she made their room beautiful. For a moment, Sabine heard nothing. Not the laughter, not the music fading, not Vivienne's voice. Her body went strangely calm, the way the air does before a storm. She looked out at the guests. Some were laughing, some looked down, some lifted phones. Some wore the blank, careful expression of people witnessing cruelty but choosing comfort over courage. Vivienne stepped beside her, smiling into the camera. "Tonight, we're doing a confidence experiment," she announced, her voice bright enough to cut glass. "We talk a lot about who belongs in luxury spaces, but what does that really mean? Should every image be visible? Should every person be part of the fantasy? We want you to vote." The screen changed again. A poll appeared for the live stream. Did Sabine belong in a luxury fashion environment, or should some people remain behind the scenes? A soft sound passed through the ballroom, half shock, half delight. The comments began racing so fast they became a blur. Some viewers called it funny, some called it honest, some were cruel, in ways strangers become when they think a screen makes them untouchable. Grant stood in the front row, filming with his phone. "Share this," he called with a grin. "This is going to break the internet." Sabine held the floral crown until the stems pressed into her palms. Deep humiliation moved through her, hot and heavy, but beneath it, something colder began to rise. She thought of every morning she had entered through the service door, every arrangement she had saved, every bride she had calmed, every insult she had swallowed because rent was real and work mattered, and dignity was easier to keep when no one tried to strip it from you in public. She looked at Vivienne. Was this approved by the hotel? The question was quiet, but the microphone caught it. The ballroom shifted. Vivian blinked, then laughed as though Sabine had missed the joke. "Oh, don't be dramatic, it's harmless. It's about confidence." Sabine turned her head slowly toward the nearest camera. Her face was steady, though her heart was breaking in places no one in that room deserved to see. "Preserve the recording." Vivian's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" Sabine placed the floral crown gently on the edge of the stage. "My husband will want to understand what your version of empowerment looks like when the woman in front of you has nothing you want." For 1 second, silence won. Then Vivian laughed. "Your husband?" Grant joined in, cruel and careless. "If there's a husband, the man deserves sympathy." A few guests laughed with him, others did not. Sabine saw Malcolm near the back wall, pale now, his tablet clutched too tightly. Good, she thought. Let him understand before the rest of them did. She reached for the staff identification badge clipped to her dress. Her fingers did not shake as she removed it. She placed it beside the floral crown, right where the spotlight could find it, then turned and walked off the stage with her head high. The room did not know what to do with a woman who refused to collapse for their entertainment. Backstage, Mara was crying. 2 banquet servers rushed toward Sabine, one touching her arm, the other whispering that they were sorry. So sorry, they had no idea. An audiovisual technician stood near the equipment table, his jaw tight with disgust. Sabine could feel the pain now, but she held it behind her teeth. If she opened her mouth too wide, she might sob, and she refused to let that be the sound they remembered. Malcolm came through the curtain less than a minute later, anger covering his fear like a cheap coat. "Sabine, you need to return to the ballroom and apologize." The staff around her went still. Sabine looked at him. "For what?" "For making the guests uncomfortable," he snapped softly. "This is a major event. You escalated a creative presentation into a scene." Sabine stared at him for a long moment, and in that silence, Malcolm seemed to shrink. Not much, just enough. "I want the presentation files preserved," she said. "The security recordings too. Any emails approving what just happened. Any messages between hotel staff and Vivian's team. Do not delete anything." His eyes hardened. "Be very careful. Threatening this hotel would be a mistake." Sabine picked up her coat from the back of a chair. "Requesting evidence is not a threat." She walked past him before he could answer. In the narrow service hall, the young audiovisual technician caught up with her. He was breathing fast, his face red with nerves. Without a word, he pressed a small drive into her hand. "It's everything," he whispered. "The full file. The rehearsal notes too. They planned it." Sabine closed her fingers around the drive. For the first time all night, her composure almost cracked. "Thank you." He nodded once and disappeared back into the shadows of the hotel. Sabine left through the same service entrance she used every morning. Outside, the night air was cold enough to sting her damp eyes. The city moved around her as though nothing had happened. Cars passed. People laughed on the sidewalk. Somewhere above, in the glowing ballroom, Vivian's event continued, though the story had already begun escaping her control. Guests were posting clips. Not the edited version Vivian wanted, the real one, the spotlight, the laughter, the poll, Sabine's question, Grant's joke, Malcolm's silence. Sabine sat in her car for several minutes before starting the engine. Her phone buzzed again and again on the passenger seat. Mara, unknown numbers, hotel staff. Then more alerts as the video spread. She did not open them. She drove home through streets blurred by tears she refused to let fall until she was alone. Roman called during the drive. His name lit the screen, steady and familiar. For a moment, Sabine almost answered. She imagined his voice filling the car, low and careful, instantly hearing what she tried to hide. She imagined telling him. She imagined the silence that would follow, the dangerous kind, the kind that meant Roman Caldero had stepped away from tenderness and into judgment. She loved him too much to hand him that darkness while her own pain was still fresh. The call ended. A message appeared a moment later. "Are you safe, my love?" Sabine pulled over beneath a street lamp, pressed her hand to her mouth, and finally let one quiet sob escape. Then she typed with fingers that felt far away. "I'm safe. Long night. Coming home soon." It was not exactly a lie. Not the kind anyone could prove. But as she drove toward the house where the most feared man in the city waited for her with warm lights and patient hands, Sabine knew something had changed. The secret life she had protected so carefully had been touched by the world she tried to keep outside it. And somewhere behind her, in the glittering ballroom of the Aurelia Grand, the first spark of a much larger fire had already begun to burn. By the time Sabine reached home, the house was quiet, in the careful way Roman preferred at night. The lights along the front path glowed low and golden, softening the dark stone of the old estate until it looked almost peaceful. To anyone else, the place might have seemed cold, too large, too guarded, too silent behind its iron gates and hidden cameras. To Sabine, it had always felt like the one place where she did not have to make herself smaller. She parked near the side entrance, sat with both hands on the steering wheel, and tried to breathe before going inside. Her phone had not stopped moving for the last 20 minutes. Messages, missed calls, unknown numbers, clips being shared, strangers arguing over her face, her body, her silence beneath the spotlight. The world had turned her pain into something people could swipe past, pause, replay, and judge. She wanted to throw the phone into the bushes and let the night swallow it whole. Roman opened the side door before she touched the handle. He stood in the warm light of the kitchen, still dressed in his dark suit from work, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled to his forearms. He did not ask why she had not come through the front. He did not ask why her eyes were red. Roman was a man who noticed too much to need easy questions. His gaze moved over her slowly, from the careful way she held her shoulders to the empty place on her dress, where her hotel badge had been clipped that morning. Something passed across his face, quiet and sharp, but he softened it before it could reach her. "Come inside," he said. Sabine stepped into the kitchen. The familiar smell of rosemary, lemon, and warm bread floated in the air. Lucia had left dinner covered on the stove, as she often did when Sabine worked late. Usually Sabine loved that small kindness. Tonight it almost broke her. Roman closed the door behind her and turned the lock. He did not touch her right away. That was one of the things she loved about him most. The whole city believed Roman Caldero took whatever he wanted, but with Sabine, he waited. He let her decide how close the world was allowed to come. She set her purse on the counter. The little drive from the audiovisual technician felt heavy inside it, heavier than a piece of plastic had any right to feel. Roman's eyes moved to the bag, then back to her face. "Long night?" he asked, his voice calm. Sabine gave a small laugh that had no humor in it. "Very long." He nodded once. "Did someone hurt you?" The question landed between them like a glass set down too hard. Sabine looked away. She wanted to say no. She wanted to keep the old peace, to protect the soft quiet that waited for them in this house. She wanted to be the woman who could handle anything with enough patience and enough grace. But the ballroom came back to her in pieces. The white light, the laughter, the screen. Grant's voice joking that her husband deserved sympathy. Vivian smiling as if cruelty could become harmless if dressed in pretty language. Malcolm ordering her to apologize for making guests uncomfortable. She pressed both palms against the cool marble counter. Not physically. Roman went still. It was such a small change that another person might have missed it. His breathing slowed. His eyes darkened. The man in the kitchen did not move, but the room seemed to understand that something dangerous had woken up inside him. Sabine turned back to him quickly. "Roman." He looked at her. "You promised me." His jaw tightened once. "I remember every promise I made to you." She searched his face, needing to believe him and afraid of what belief would cost. "Then please remember it now." For a long moment, The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rain beginning softly against the windows. Roman crossed the kitchen with slow steps, stopping close enough for her to feel his warmth, but still not touching her. "Tell me," he said. Sabine opened her mouth, but no words came. Her throat closed around the story. She had survived the ballroom by standing tall. She had survived the drive home by staying numb. But standing in front of Roman, in the one place where she did not have to perform strength, she finally felt the true weight of what had happened. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. Roman lifted his hand, then stopped halfway, waiting. Sabine stepped forward and let herself fall into him. His arms closed around her with quiet force, not crushing, not claiming, holding. Sabine pressed her face against his chest and finally cried in a way she had refused to cry beneath the spotlight. Roman did not speak over her. He did not demand names. He did not promise ruin. He only held her, one hand steady at the back of her head, the other spread wide against her spine, as if he could keep the broken pieces of the evening from cutting any deeper. When she could breathe again, she told him everything. She told him about Vivienne's comments during setup, about Grant encouraging her, about Malcolm pretending not to see, about the crown, the dark room, the spotlight, the screen, the pole, the laughter. She told him about asking whether the hotel approved it. She told him about Vivienne calling it harmless comedy. She told him about Grant's joke. Her voice broke there, but she forced herself to keep going. She told him about the files, the security recordings, the young technician who copied the presentation, and the clips already spreading online. Roman listened without interrupting. His face became very still, but his arms stayed gentle. When Sabine finished, he released a slow breath. "Show me." She pulled the drive from her purse, then hesitated. "Roman, I need you to hear me before you watch this." His eyes lifted to hers. "I do not want blood for this," she said. "I do not want people disappearing. I do not want whispers and fear, and men apologizing because they think they might not make it home. I am angry. I am hurt. I am humiliated. But I will not let them turn what happened to me into proof that the only way I can be respected is through violence." Roman looked at the drive in her hand. For the first time that night, the pain reached his face clearly. Not rage, pain. The kind of pain that came from knowing the woman he loved had stood alone in a room where he would have crossed fire to reach her. "I want to hurt them," he said quietly. "I know. I want to make every person who laughed understand what fear tastes like. I know that too." His gaze returned to hers. "But that would not be justice for you." Sabine's lips trembled. "No, it would be anger for you." Roman closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, the danger was still there, but something else stood in front of it. Discipline, love, made heavier by restraint. "Then we do this your way," he said. Sabine handed him the drive. They watched the footage in Roman's private study, a dark room lined with old books, locked cabinets, and a long desk where powerful men had signed agreements they later regretted. Sabine sat on the leather sofa with a blanket around her shoulders, while Roman stood behind the desk, one hand resting flat against the wood. The video began with bright lights and music, Vivienne smiling, guests clapping, Sabine walking into the room with the floral crown. Then the darkness, the spotlight, the photographs. Roman did not move. Only his eyes changed. Sabine watched him watch her humiliation, and somehow that was almost as painful as living it the first time. She saw the moment he heard Grant's comment. His fingers curled once against the desk. Then he let them open. He did not reach for his phone. He did not call his men. He did not let rage make decisions in the room where his wife had asked for restraint. When the footage ended, Roman turned it off. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he picked up his phone and called his attorney. By sunrise, Roman's house was awake. Not loudly, never loudly, but awake in a way Sabine had only seen during true emergencies. Attorneys arrived before coffee had finished brewing. Financial analysts came through the side entrance with laptops and locked cases. A communications advisor set up in the dining room. 2 investigators sat at the kitchen table, carefully labeling copies of videos, emails, contracts, messages, and public posts. Roman did not summon his enforcers. He summoned people who carried briefcases instead of weapons, and for that, Sabine loved him more than she knew how to say. He kept his promise. His team began quietly pulling every thread, connecting Vivian Sloan, Grant Hollis, the Aurelia Grand, and Roman's legitimate companies. They reviewed sponsorship agreements, hotel contracts, event approvals, brand partnerships, development proposals, and communications between Grant's family and Caldero Holdings. They found what Roman already suspected. Grant's family needed him badly. Their waterfront redevelopment project looked impressive in press releases, but without Roman's security contracts, labor connections, port access, and property agreements, the entire deal would become slow, expensive, and dangerously uncertain. Grant had been celebrating an approval he did not yet have. Sabine watched from the doorway of the dining room, wrapped in Roman's sweater, her hair loose around her face. She expected to feel satisfaction. Instead, she felt tired. There was no joy in realizing cruel people had been standing on borrowed ground. There was only the strange, heavy ache of knowing they had treated her that way because they thought she had no ground at all. Roman came to stand beside her. "You should sleep. So should you. I will when this is stable." She glanced at him. "Stable is not one of your favorite words." His mouth softened at one corner. "It is becoming one." Sabine leaned her shoulder against his arm. "What happens now?" "Grant is scheduled at Caldero Holdings this morning to finalize the waterfront proposal." Her eyes narrowed. "You are still meeting him?" "Yes." "Roman, I am not going to threaten him." His voice was even. "I am going to let him explain himself in a room where lying will not help him." "And Vivian?" "She is coming with him. She planned to film the celebration after the agreement." Sabine looked toward the windows, where morning light was turning the garden silver. "Of course she did." Roman turned to her fully. "Do you want to be there?" The question surprised her. Part of her wanted to say yes. Part of her wanted to walk into that conference room and watch their faces change when they learned the insignificant hotel florist had a name that could close doors they had spent years trying to open. But another part of her was too raw. She did not need to watch them panic in order to know who they were. She did not want to build her healing around their fear. "No," she said at last. "I want you to tell me the truth when you come home." Roman touched her cheek. "Always." Grant Hollis arrived at Caldero Holdings at 10 in the morning, wearing a blue suit, a victory smile, and the kind of confidence that had never been tested by consequences. Vivian came with him in a cream dress, her hair shining, her phone already in her hand. She had posted a vague story earlier that morning about being misunderstood by bitter people online. It had not landed well. The internet had begun turning, not completely, not cleanly, but enough. Unedited clips were everywhere. Former employees had started commenting. Other workers from past events had shared stories about Vivian's public sweetness and private contempt. Her brand team was panicking, but Vivian still believed the right connection could steady the room. Roman entered the conference room without greeting either of them warmly. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, and the calm expression that made older men nervous before younger men understood why. Grant stood immediately, hand out. "Mr. Caldero, great to finally sit down. We're excited about this one." Roman did not take his hand. Grant's smile faltered. Vivian lowered her phone slowly. Roman walked to the head of the table. There were no contracts waiting, no folders, no champagne, only a remote placed beside a glass of water. "Sit," Roman said. Grant sat. Vivian remained standing for half a second, then sat too. Roman pressed the remote. The large screen at the end of the conference room lit up. For a moment, it showed only black. Then the image appeared. Sabine beneath the spotlight, holding the floral crown with both hands, her face calm in a way that now seemed almost unbearable. Grant's face drained of color first. Vivian's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Roman looked at them both. Explain why my wife was used as entertainment at an event claiming to honor women. The room went silent. It was not the shocked silence of people who were sorry. It was the stunned silence of people watching a wall fall away and reveal the edge of a cliff. Your wife? Grant whispered. Roman did not repeat himself. Vivian turned sharply toward Grant. You told me she was staff. She was staff, Grant snapped, then realized the sentence had made things worse. I mean, I didn't know. How would I know? Roman sat down slowly. That is what interests me. Grant swallowed. Mr. Caldero, I want to be very clear. I had no idea Vivian was going to take it that far. Vivian stared at him. Excuse me? You planned the presentation, Grant said quickly. You said controversy would boost engagement. You told me behind-the-scenes humiliation always performs, she shot back. You told my team to get the photos. I never said humiliate her. You laughed. You filmed it. You encouraged people to share it. Their loyalty vanished so quickly it almost became quiet comedy. Roman watched them without changing expression. They had arrived as partners ready to celebrate power. In less than 2 minutes, they had become strangers fighting over the last seat in a sinking boat. When they finally stopped talking, Roman folded his hands on the table. I am not going to threaten you, he said. Grant blinked, almost hopeful. I am not going to harm you. I am not going to send men to your homes. I am not going to use fear to make you apologize. Vivian gripped the edge of the table. Then we can fix this. I can post an apology. We can donate. I can invite her on my platform and give her a chance to tell her side. Roman's eyes moved to her slowly. You already gave her a platform. You used it to ask strangers whether she belonged in the room. Vivian's face flushed. Roman looked at Grant. I have reviewed the Hollis waterfront proposal. Caldero Holdings will not support it. We are withdrawing from all discussions connected to the project. Our security companies will not participate. Our labor partners will not prioritize it. Our properties will not be included. I will not enter business with a man who shows cruelty toward people he believes cannot fight back. Grant leaned forward, panic breaking through his polished voice. You can't pull out over one bad moment. I can. My family has already announced the development timeline. That was unwise. We need those agreements. I know. Grant's eyes hardened. So this is a threat. Roman's voice stayed calm. No. A threat asks for something. I am asking for nothing. I am simply choosing not to trust you. Vivian's voice came smaller. Would an apology change your mind? Roman looked at her for a long moment. An apology offered to recover sponsorships is only another performance. You must decide whether you are sorry because you lost something or because you finally understand what you did. Neither of them had an answer. By afternoon, the story had spread far beyond Vivian's control. Sponsors began making statements. One ended its partnership before lunch. Another followed before dinner. A women's clothing brand quietly removed Vivian's campaign images from its website. A wellness company announced that its values were not aligned with cruelty disguised as content. For once, the language of public relations worked against her instead of for her. The Aurelia Grand tried to release a careful statement about an unfortunate incident, but employees did not let it stand. Someone leaked internal emails showing that hotel management knew the presentation would involve a staff member and had approved special access to behind-the-scenes photos. Malcolm Reed was dismissed before the end of the week. The hotel announced new rules allowing workers to stop events involving harassment, humiliation, unsafe treatment, or abusive behavior without risking their jobs. Sabine read the statement twice. It was not enough, but it was something. Sometimes justice did not arrive as a thunderclap. Sometimes it came as one locked door opening for the next person. Roman came home after sunset. Sabine was in the restored greenhouse behind the house, sitting at the old wooden table where she sometimes tested arrangements. Around her, plants climbed toward the glass roof, their leaves dark against the violet evening. Some of them were expensive and rare. Others had been discarded by hotels, nurseries, or clients who thought damaged plants were no longer worth saving. Sabine had always loved those most. Crooked stems, broken leaves, roots that looked half dead until given enough time and the right soil. Roman entered quietly. He had changed out of his suit jacket, but the day still clung to him. Sabine looked up. "Did you hurt anyone?" "No." "Did you frighten anyone?" He considered that. Not on purpose. Despite herself, she almost smiled. "Roman, I did not threaten them. I did not send anyone after them. I ended a business relationship and told them why." Sabine studied him, then nodded, her shoulders lowered for the first time all day. "Thank you." Roman sat across from her. The greenhouse lights glowed softly above them. For a moment, neither spoke. "I should have told you when I left the hotel," Sabine said. Roman's face tightened with concern, not accusation. "I thought I was protecting you," she continued. "But I think I was also trying to prove something to myself, that I could carry it alone, that I was still strong if I didn't need you." "You are strong whether you need me or not." Her eyes warmed with tears again, but these were different. Softer, cleaner. "I know, but silence did not protect you. It only left me alone with it." Roman reached across the table, palm open. Sabine placed her hand in his. "I do not want to control how you respond to pain," he said, "but I cannot be your husband only when the world is gentle." She looked down at their joined hands. His were scarred and broad. Hers were nicked from thorns and wire. Different kinds of damage, different kinds of work. "I will tell you next time," she said, "but you have to keep letting me decide what justice looks like." "I will try." She raised an eyebrow. Roman exhaled. "I will do it." That made her smile for real. In the weeks that followed, Sabine did not return to work at the Aurelia Grand. The hotel offered an apology, then a larger apology, then a private meeting with executives who spoke in careful tones and used words like healing and partnership. Sabine listened. She accepted what was useful. She refused what felt like decoration. She had spent too long making ugly rooms beautiful for other people. She was no longer interested in helping powerful places look kind while their workers stayed afraid. The idea came quietly at first. Then it grew. With Roman's lawful funding kept separate from his darker reputation, and with Sabine's name at the center instead of hidden behind his, they established the Mercer Workplace Dignity Project. Sabine chose the name before Roman could suggest anything grander. It would help hotel workers, servers, retail staff, event crews, cleaners, assistants, drivers, and anyone else expected to smile while being mistreated by people with money. The project offered legal support, emergency income, counseling, and evidence preservation. No one had to go public to get help. No one had to turn their pain into content. No one had to be perfect to be believed. Sabine sat through every planning meeting. She chose the attorneys carefully. She interviewed counselors herself. She insisted on a hotline staffed by real people, not only forms and recorded messages. She created a small guide teaching workers how to preserve emails, recordings, schedules, messages, and witness names before management could make things disappear. Roman watched her build the organization with the same quiet wonder he had once shown while watching her build flowers. He did not step in front of her. When donors asked to speak to him, he redirected them to Sabine. When reporters asked if the project existed because of his power, he answered that it existed because of her character. Months passed. Winter softened into spring. The video became less of a wound and more of a doorway Sabine had been pushed through into a larger life. It still hurt sometimes. Cruel things did not become harmless just because useful things grew from them. But Sabine no longer felt trapped beneath that spotlight. The room had not ended her. The laughter had not defined her. The people who tried to make her small had only revealed the size of what she was ready to build. She left the hotel world behind and opened a training greenhouse in the restored glass building where she and Roman had married. Not the private one behind their home, but a larger greenhouse on the edge of the city, on land Roman once planned to fold into a business park. Sabine changed that plan with one look. The building became a school for floral design, event production, and small business training. Her first students were people luxury industries often ignored: single mothers, former hotel workers, older women returning to work after years away, people with bodies, faces, histories, and accents that had made employers underestimate them before seeing what their hands could do. Sabine taught them everything: how to condition roses, how to price labor, how to build arches that could survive wind, how to speak to clients who confused kindness with permission, how to walk into expensive rooms without asking invisible forgiveness for existing there. Some days, Roman would arrive late and stand near the back, watching her teach with dirt on her dress and sunlight in her hair. The students were afraid of him at first. Most people were. But Roman carried buckets when Sabine told him to. He swept broken stems from the floor. He learned the difference between ranunculus and garden roses because Sabine refused to let him call everything with petals a flower. Slowly, the fear around him changed shape. It did not vanish completely. Roman Caldero would never be a harmless man. But in the greenhouse, among people learning how to begin again, he became simply Sabine's husband before he was anything else. On the morning of the opening ceremony, the greenhouse was full of flowers grown from plants other businesses had thrown away. Bent orchids bloomed from careful stakes. Roses that had arrived half frozen opened in deep pink waves. Vines climbed the old iron walls. Tables held arrangements made by the first students, each one different, each one carrying the shy pride of its maker. Reporters gathered near the entrance. Former clients came. Hotel workers came. Sponsors came too, though Sabine made sure none of them stood closer to the cameras than the students. For the first time, Sabine had agreed to let the world know she was married. Not because she needed Roman's name, not because secrecy had been shameful, but because hiding was no longer protecting the life they had built. She had wanted to know who she was when no one knew his name. Now she knew, and because she knew, she could let the truth stand beside her without disappearing into it. Roman arrived without guards at his shoulders, without a dramatic entrance, without the dark ceremony people expected from him. He wore a simple black suit and carried no expression except the soft one that appeared whenever he saw her. The crowd shifted when they recognized him. Conversations lowered. Cameras turned. Some people stepped back without meaning to. Sabine did not move toward him like a woman being rescued. She held out her hand. Roman crossed the greenhouse and took it. That single gesture seemed to quiet everyone more than any threat could have. Sabine, standing in a deep green dress surrounded by flowers and students and sunlight, did not look like a secret anymore. Roman lifted their joined hands slightly. "My name is Roman Caldero," he said to the room. His voice was low, but every person heard it. "And I am Sabine's husband." The silence that followed was not cruel this time. It was full of wonder. Roman looked at the students, the workers, the reporters, the people who had come expecting a story about scandal, and found something gentler and stronger waiting instead. "Most people have feared me for a long time," he said. "Some had reason. Some only heard stories, but my wife taught me that fear and respect are not the same thing. Fear disappears the moment power disappears. Respect survives because it is earned through character. Sabine has more character than any person I have ever known." Sabine squeezed his hand. He stopped there because he knew the rest belonged to her. She stepped forward. The greenhouse smelled of wet soil, roses, and something new beginning. She looked out at the faces before her and did not search for the ones who once laughed. They did not matter in this room. This room was for the overlooked, the underestimated, the people who had been told to stand behind the scenes, then learned they could build the whole stage. A lot of people asked me why I kept working after marrying someone powerful, Sabine said. Some asked it kindly, some did not. The answer is simple. I needed to know who I was when no one knew his name. Her voice stayed steady, but Roman felt the truth move through her hand. I love my husband, she continued, but love that erases you is not love. Power that speaks over you is not protection. And respect that only appears when people are afraid is not respect at all. I wanted my work to matter because it was mine. I wanted my life to be seen clearly, not through fear, not through gossip, not through someone else's shadow. She turned toward the students standing near the flower tables. Some were crying, some were smiling. One older woman in a blue sweater held a pair of pruning shears against her chest like they were made of gold. This greenhouse is for anyone who has been told they do not belong in beautiful rooms, Sabine said. You do. And if no one opens the door, we will grow our own room from the ground up. Applause began softly, then rose until it filled the glass walls and trembled through the old iron frame. Roman stood beside her, not in front of her, not behind her, beside her. His hand remained wrapped around hers, steady and warm. Later, after the reporters left and the guests drifted away with small bundles of flowers tied in ribbon, Sabine stayed inside the greenhouse as evening settled. The students had gone home. The tables were messy. Petals dotted the floor. A few candles still burned near the back wall where she and Roman had once exchanged vows in secret. The place looked imperfect now, and she loved it more that way. Living things were not meant to stay untouched. A young student named Elena lingered near the doorway, holding a tray of rescued violets. "Mrs. Caldero?" she asked shyly. Sabine looked over. "You can call me Sabine." Elena smiled a little. "Why flowers?" Sabine glanced around the greenhouse. Outside, the sky had turned lavender. Inside, damaged plants reached toward the last of the light. "Because people think flowers are delicate," she said. "But they survive storms, rough hands, bad soil, being cut, being moved, being forgotten. And still, when they are cared for, they open." Elena looked at the violets in her hands, then nodded, as if she understood more than she could say. She left a few minutes later, and the greenhouse became quiet. Roman came to stand behind Sabine, wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back against him, feeling his breath near her temple, his strength at her back, his restraint, his patience, his love. Once, she had feared that letting the world know about him would swallow her name. Now she knew better. A shadow could not swallow a woman who had become her own light. "Are you happy?" Roman asked. Sabine looked at the flowers grown from broken stems, at the tables where new hands had learned new work, at the glass ceiling catching the first stars. "Yes," she said, "not because everything stopped hurting, because it became something useful." Roman kissed the side of her head. "You built a kingdom out of flowers." Sabine smiled. "No, we built a place where people can stop asking permission to bloom." He turned her gently in his arms. For a moment, the feared man and the floral designer stood together in the soft green light, surrounded by all the discarded things she had taught to live again. Roman touched her face with the reverence of a man who had learned that love was not possession, and Sabine looked back at him with the calm strength of a woman who had learned that being protected did not mean being hidden. Outside, the city still moved with all its hunger, gossip, money, and danger. There would always be people like Vivian, polishing cruelty until it looked like confidence. There would always be men like Grant, mistaking inheritance for worth. There would always be rooms where silence tried to protect comfort instead of truth. But there would also be this greenhouse, this work, this love, this woman, standing where she chose to stand. And when the night settled fully over the glass roof, Sabine Caldero stayed there beside her husband, surrounded by flowers that had once been damaged, discarded, and underestimated, knowing at last that true love does not place one person behind another. It teaches two people to stand beside each other without surrendering who they are.